Welcome everybody back into Nerd Sesh. As always, I'm Carson Brabant. Alongside me is Logan Camden, and today we conclude our epic journey of ranking the top 50 players in NBA history with the top 10. What a wild ride it has been, Logan. So much has happened. I turned 25 in the process of us doing this series, and thank you all for the very kind birthday wishes. You guys are the best. And I have to say, now that my prefrontal cortex is fully developed, I got it all wrong, man. The whole list is wrong. I got to throw it out. We got to immediately start over. Is that fine with you?
I genuinely enjoy that, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. I actually feel pretty good about my list.
I feel good about, like, my top 20. I feel better about, like, I feel like we did the top 25, and ever since we did the top 25, I wanted to redo it. Now I feel good about my top 20 to 25. Now that we did the top 50, I want to redo the top 50, but we can't. We already spent a million hours doing all of those. So,
yeah,
a later date, we will run this thing back, and we will because my prefrontal cortex hasn't developed. We're going to finish this list, and I'm not 25. So, just to make it right, when we're both fully developed, we'll run it back.
You're going to have the same thing.
And I'm going to go, wow, Chris Webber at 46 was a dazzling, brilliant maneuver.
It was definitely dazzling, but we have definitely already spent enough time debating Chris Webber for a couple years at least. So it has been so much fun. I have to say, the top 10, they're the greatest of the greats. They're going to be a ton of fun to discuss, but it was really fun getting into the back half of this list. I think that was actually my favorite part, talking about guys who we don't get to talk about quite as much. And so, Logan, let's relive some of those moments before we get into the top 10. Count me down all the way from 50 to number 11. Let's hear the list.
In number 50, I have Jason Kidd. 49, Russell Westbrook. 48, big game James Worthy. 47, Manu Ginobili. 46, God, this guy put Chris Webber. 45, Reggie Miller. 44, Ray Allen. 43, Damian Lillard. 42, Gary Payton. 41, Jimmy Butler. 40, James Harden. 39, Clyde Drexler. 38, Bill Walton. 37, Jason Tatum. 36, Isaiah Thomas. 35, Karl Malone. 34, Elgin Baylor. 33, Hondo, John Havlicek. 32, Scottie Pippen. 31, David Robinson. 30, Anthony Davis. 29, Luka Doncic. 28, SGA. 27, Kawhi Leonard. 26, Rick Barry. 25, D. Wade. 24, Steve Nash. 23, Charles Barkley. 22, Chris Paul. 21, Moses Malone. 20, Julius Erving. 19, Giannis Antetokounmpo. 18, Nikola Jokic. 17, Oscar Robertson. 16, Kevin Durant. 15, Dirk Nowitzki. 14, Wilt Chamberlain. 13, Kevin Garnett. 12, Jerry West. And 11, Kobe Bryant.
I have, at number 50, Isaiah Thomas. 49, Jimmy Butler. 48, Joel Embiid. 47, Luka Doncic. 46, Bill Walton. 45, Paul Pierce. 44, Ray Allen. 43, Clyde Drexler. 42, Walt Clyde Frazier. 41, George the Iceman Gervin. 40, Robert E. Lee Pettit. 39, Reggie Minion. 38, Jay Kidd. 37, Johnny Stockton. 36, Patrick Ewing. 35, Elgin Baylor. 34, Anthony Davis. 33, SGA. 32, James Harden. 31, Kawhi Leonard. 30, Hondo. 29, Scottie Pippen. 28, Moses Malone. 27, Rick Barry. 26, Steve Nash. 25, Dwayne Wade. 24, Charles Barkley. 23, Karl Malone. 22, David Robinson. 21, my beloved Chris Paul. At number 20, I have Dr. J. Number 19 is Giannis. 18, Dirk. 17, Oscar. 16, Jokic. 15, Kevin Durant. 14, Jerry West. 13, Kevin Garnett. 12, Kobe Bryant, and number 11, Wilt the Stilt Chamberlain. So, for all of the disagreements that we have had up to this point on the list, we do have the same players in our top 10 in some order. Who is number 10 for you, Logan?
In my 10 spot, this is where I have Hakeem Olajuwon, and Hakeem is a really interesting one to rank. I think that some people behind him peaked higher than him, like a Wilt Chamberlain, I think peaked higher than Hakeem, in my opinion. That is up for debate. I think Hakeem was probably the best offensive and defensive player on the planet at his peak. And Hakeem, I think, peaks higher, arguably, than some of the people that I do have ranked above him on this list. I do think that Hakeem's can get underrated in the years before his peak. I think we all kind of know about, we've talked a lot about Hakeem, what he does with those two title teams. They're two of the greatest championship runs ever, considering the teams that they had to go through, the supporting cast that Hakeem was dragging to those titles, and just how transformative of a player he was. But I think he can kind of get underrated in the years leading up to that. Ironically enough, a lot of people dog on the fact that Hakeem didn't win a playoff series from 88 to 92, while they kind of ignore the fact that Hakeem joins the Rockets and immediately takes them from a 29-win team to a 48-win team. Like, immediately when Hakeem enters the league, he's a really good two-way player, and he's really good defensively. And one of the fascinating things just factually about Hakeem is just how quick he took to the sport. Hakeem didn't start playing basketball until he was 15 years old. He played handball and soccer prior to playing it. And it's kind of crazy. From starting playing basketball at 15, he immediately goes to college in Houston and becomes one of the greatest college players ever. Gets to the Final Four 3 times, is a 2-time runner-up in college. So just really remarkable how quickly, Hakeem took to the game and was this great, and how translatable his skills were from soccer. He was a goalie, he was a goalkeeper when he played soccer, and how those skills translated over. But I think that people kind of unfairly hold against him the fact that, he had that kind of lull in the middle of his career, when they're kind of ignoring the fact that Hakeem, in my opinion, is dragging some really weak supporting cast to just being respectable, good teams. Like, that does mean something to me. It's not the be-all, end-all that he was getting bounced in the first round. I don't think all of that was his fault. And also, you have to remember that Hakeem does get to the finals very early on in his career as well. And so I think that when you're taking Hakeem, I think he has to be in the top 10. I think you're getting a guy that is going to give you an opportunity, if you put the team around him early on, to go deep into the playoffs, to have a chance at titles. But later on, you are getting the best player on the planet, unequivocally, and one of the highest two-way peaks of all time. Like, the scoring translated, he's the post moves, the footwork offensively, the craft on that end, the shooting touch, and then defensively, I think you're getting a top 2, top 3 player of all time. So I think a top 10 peak to top 5 peak, wherever you want to put him, an extremely high peak, really good longevity. Like, I think he belongs in the top 10. I just, kind of like I said with Kobe, I just prefer the 9 guys that I have above him. I don't really have anything negative to say about Hakeem. I love the Dream, man. And those 2 championship runs are 2 of the greatest all time, and I think they do the most heavy lifting in getting him on this list. But I think that they can kind of overshadow that Hakeem was great for 8 years to a decade leading up to that.
Yeah, I have Hakeem at number 8 on my list, and I think an archetype that I have advocated for throughout this top 50 has been the top-tier defensive anchor big, who is also a really good scorer, and just the two-way foundation that gives you in terms of the ability to be a high-level floor raiser. If it was Patrick Ewing, David Robinson, and Hakeem is kind of like the ultimate version of that. He is the dream combination of dominant interior defense and rim protection with elite scoring that translated to the playoffs in a way that is completely on another level from David Robinson or Patrick Ewing, and that's really what puts Hakeem into a different tier as an all-time player. He's the second greatest defender in NBA history. A lot of people consider him the greatest, which I just don't think is true, considering impact that another player had in another era. But when you think about the defensive skill set that Hakeem had, it really is flawless. He is an all-time great rim protector. He is an all-time great shot blocker. He had some of the greatest hands that we've ever seen from a big man defensively, and his agility and his ability to cover ground and recover so quickly is just absolutely remarkable. And so you put it all together, all-time great rim protection, unique ability to guard in space and force steals, and then also really strong defensive rebounder, really strong post defender. Hakeem was the best defender of an era that was chock full of dominant defensive bigs. And so that is where his value comes first and foremost. That is what you see immediately when he sets foot in the league. As you mentioned, as a rookie, he joins the number 17 defense and he makes them the number 4 defense in the NBA, and he improves them as a team by 19 wins. So he was bringing that sort of impact immediately, right when he set foot in the NBA. And as you're saying, like, there is a really strong floor-raising resume with Hakeem before he ever wins a title. Now, I do think he took a leap in 1993. I do think he was a different player from 93 to 95 than he was for the rest of his career. So the peak with him is incredibly high. It also is distinct from the rest, but the rest is still awesome. And from 87 to 92, he was dealing with some really subpar supporting casts. Like all the way from Ralph Sampson to Clyde Drexler joining the team, he never played with a real all-star. Otis Thorpe was a one-time all-star in 1992. That's as fake an all-star as there can be, no disrespect. So the supporting casts were extremely lacking, and still on the back of anchoring a top 5 defense every single year and still being a very good scorer, Hakeem is getting his teams into the playoffs. And no, they're not great. They win 56% of the games that he plays in that run from 87 to 92. They only win about 40% without him. So the impact is very clearly strong there. But again, it's not in the sort of top tier of all-time greats because he just wasn't a very impactful offensive player yet. Like, the Rockets did not have a single above average offense in that run from 87 to 92, and their offensive rating hardly changed in games that Hakeem played versus games that he didn't. So his impact was overwhelmingly defensive. And then, yes, he was a volume scorer, but his efficiency was just okay because he was never a great play finishing big. He relied a lot on high post work and isolation and tough shot making. And so his efficiency was just solid. And then he was a very limited passer for pretty much his entire career up until 1993, which is when he takes that leap and he becomes a better all-around offensive player. But through 1992, Hakeem is only giving you about 2 assists a game and more than 3 turnovers. So he was a flawed offensive number one. He wasn't a particularly good offensive number one at that time. Still extremely impactful because he's one of the greatest defenders that we've ever seen, but he does take another leap when you look at 1993, because that's when he improves as a passer, and that's when he just becomes this nuclear playoff scorer. And in 1994 and 1995, those are 2 of the greatest two-way carry jobs that we've ever seen, 2 of the greatest playoff runs that we've ever seen. Across those 2 runs, he averages 31 points, 11 rebounds, 4.5 assists a game on plus 3% relative true shooting with 5 blocks per game. And again, he's the best defender on the planet at this time, and he is absolutely the best scorer on the planet in the absence of Michael Jordan. I would disagree with you saying that he's the best offensive player, because even though he was better as a passer, Hakeem still never led an elite offense as the guy, because he was still just a solid passer. But the playoff scoring was immaculate, and the artistry is what stands out so much with Hakeem. Like the grace, the quickness of his first step as a face-up player, the body control on spins, and the footwork is all-time great, of course, and then the shot making is just really exceptional. Like, he is probably the most skilled post scorer that we've ever seen, and he didn't have the paths to hyper efficiency as a scorer that a Kareem or a Shaq did. He never dominated the interior like those guys did. He was never that level of play finisher, but I do think his ability to get to the same shots that he lived off in the regular season in the playoffs and make those shots at a pretty good clip is something that led to his scoring translating so well in 94 and 95. It's like what we talk about with Kobe from 2008 to 2010. When you are that versatile as a scorer and you can do it creating for yourself against really good playoff defenses and make a good living off of tough shots, that is extremely valuable. And so I do think he's a historically great floor raiser who doesn't get enough credit. I think he has an extremely high peak. I would say a top 5 peak in NBA history when you're talking about 93 to 95. And he's got strong longevity, like 15 years as a star level player, because he was so good when he got into the league. 93 to 95, Hakeem was a different beast, though. And it's not just like the stars aligned at that moment in time, but Hakeem always could have gotten it done before that. Like, he really did level up as a player at that time. And so although I value all of the years around it, I do think the guys above him were actually even more consistent in terms of their superstar impact, because that's just the level that we're at here. But I do value the peak a lot with Hakeem. I think the longevity is pretty strong. And it is ultimately those 2 things that put him above the guys who I have in my numbers 9 and 10 spot. Those are guys who had a lot more team success in their primes, teams, but they had a lot more help. And I do believe that Hakeem was the more impactful player overall. From 85 all the way to 97, the Rockets won 61% of the games that he played and just 41% of the games that he missed. So he was carrying teams for really his entire prime. And even when he gets Clyde Drexler, it's like we are talking about a version of Clyde who is not at his peak. And so Hakeem was still doing ridiculous heavy lifting as a two-way superstar. And he got his team to the final, and he got them through an exceedingly difficult path, too. Like, probably the toughest path any team has ever had to go through.
I'm very intrigued.
By who I have in my 9 and 10 spots?
I think I know who you're alluding to because they're the two guys that I think I have in front of Hakeem, but I'm not 100% sure. I don't know. It's strange. I think Hakeem has slowly, risen slightly up your board a little bit over these last couple of years, but it's not much. We're not far apart, but I think I know who you're talking about.
Well, the guy in my 10 spot is actually the player who I've dropped the most since our list 3 years ago. And there's a lot that has changed in terms of just the way that I view a lot of these players in that time. But Magic Johnson is the guy in my 10 spot. He is a top 5 offensive player ever. He is the single greatest passer in NBA history. And I just want to hammer home how extremely valuable his playmaking was, because I do think some people of our generation underrate Magic because he had a goofy looking jump shot and maybe the aesthetics aren't there and the scoring volume doesn't blow you out of the water. But I will always maintain that Magic is an extremely underrated scorer because he was one of those guys, like a Steve Nash, who had a constant scoring threat, but chose to leverage that towards all-time great playmaking first, and he did that better than anybody else in the history of this game. Like, as a passer, I kind of think he's beyond comparison to have the size that he did.
He's by himself, bro.
Like 6'9", the most audacious, the most creative passer we've ever seen, the best transition playmaker we've ever seen, somebody who would literally try anything when you're talking about lob passes in traffic and like tight window bounce passes and one-handed hook passes. Like, there's nothing that he wouldn't try and there's nothing that he couldn't do. And the value that added to an offense was just so massive. He was so deceptive. He saw everything. He could hit any pass from any angle. And so that is his greatest superpower as a player, of course. But again, I do think the scoring with Magic is really underrated because he was an extremely tough cover. To have the combination of ball handling and burst that he did at that size, combined with the touch that he had in the paint, where he had a really good hook shot, he had a beautiful little runner game, he was a good mid-range shooter if you gave him space, and then he was a very good finisher at the rim, really good at finding angles, and obviously had great size. Like, he was inside of 17 feet, a very good scorer. And in transition, just an absolute wagon to deal with. So over his career, the guy's giving you almost 20 points per game on like plus 7.5% relative true shooting. That efficiency is just so remarkable. It's some of the greatest that we've ever seen. And so his resume as an offensive player kind of speaks for itself, right? The greatest transition player ever, the greatest passer ever, an underrated, hyper-efficient scorer. And one thing that I value in my offensive GOATs that I talk about is aggression and the ability to hit on home runs and find the easy stuff. And that's where I just view him and Steve Nash, even though in some ways they're so different as players, as being so aligned on just like being A+ in those categories. So that's probably why they have the 2 best track records ever of leading to dominant team offense. Like, Magic led 5 number 1 offenses in 6 years. He led 4 number 1 playoff offenses in 5 years. And that was happening in Kareem's later years. So the Lakers' best offenses, they're truly all-time great offenses, coincided with Magic's peak even as Kareem was diminishing. So he's a very impactful player. And overwhelmingly, that impact is coming on the offensive side of the ball. And we see from 84 to 91, when Magic played, the Lakers had better than a 114 offensive rating. In games that he missed, they had just over a 109 offensive rating. So a 5-point drop-off is significant, but it is worth noting that their offenses were still pretty good without him. I mean, they took a leap to all-time great with him, but Magic did have a lot of help. Magic had honestly a historic amount of help. He also had a historic amount of team success. The Lakers won 74% of the games that he played. They won 5 titles, of course. They were a contender basically every single year of his career. But they also won 58% of the games without him. They were 64-46 without Magic. That is a higher number than we're going to see from basically anybody else in the entire top 50. So that's where we have to acknowledge the situation. He joined a 47-win team that had won a playoff series, that had the best player in the world, and he improved them immediately as a rookie to a 60-win team, and they won the title. And of course, he has an iconic Game 6 performance. Like, Magic is awesome. That goes without saying. But when we are getting down to the nitty-gritty details and trying to isolate the impact these individual guys had and the value they added overall in their careers, it does matter to talk about the help that he had. And even when he retires, 1991, his last year, Lakers won 58 games. They made the finals. He's still leading an awesome offense. After he leaves, they drop off by a good bit, but they were still a 43-win team. Their offense dropped off significantly, but again, he just had a lot of talent alongside him over the years. The Kareem factor, you really can't overstate being paired alongside the best player in the world for those years. And again, he continued leading elite offenses after Kareem was over the hill, but then he did have an awesome, versatile scoring forward in James Worthy, who I know you had in your top 50 players. He did have a Byron Scott alongside him. He did have the elite defense of a Michael Cooper. In the early years, he did have, along with Kareem, Jamal Wilkes and Norm Nixon, and just a lot of talent on those Lakers teams. They're some of the most stacked that we've ever seen. So he was an absolute offensive monster, and again, a proven track record of leading to really good team success without Kareem. When they were teammates over the years in games that he played that Kareem missed, the Lakers were 23-8. And then again, after Kareem tailed off, and even after Kareem retired, Magic leads a 63-win team that's the number 1 offense in the NBA in 1990. He leads a 58-win team that's a top 5 offense and goes to the finals in 1991. But again, when you isolate the impact over a career, I do think that this is about the right range for Magic. And there's 2 reasons for that. Number 1 is the completely mediocre defense. I think that that has to be mentioned because when we are looking at the top 10, most of these guys are two-way giants. There's 2 players who are low impact defenders, but they're 2 of the greatest offensive players that we've ever seen. The other guy I actually think is even more transformative offensively than Magic and also has better longevity, so he winds up a couple spots higher for me. Magic was just very meh defensively. He had good hands. He was a good defensive rebounder, but he was very difficult to find a role for defensively because of his slow-footedness, because he didn't offer you value as a secondary rim protector. Like, mediocre is really just the word that comes to mind with Magic's defense. And so when you compare that to a lot of these other guys, that holds him back just a tad. And then the other thing is the lack of longevity. Even though Magic gives you 12 fantastic years, he sets foot in the NBA. I think he's a top 10 player. He leaves the NBA. He's still a top 5 player. And there's a couple years in there where he makes a really good argument for being the best player in the world. That's enough to get on here because the peak is so high and his prime was so damn good. But everybody else in the top 10, or really the top 8, because I think him and the guy in my 9 spot, they have a lot of similarities actually in terms of resume, and especially when it comes to the longevity point. The top 8, all those guys peaked crazy high, and they pretty much all did it for longer. And so when I come back to my criteria, which I didn't restate before we started this episode, but I've already said it a million times, who gives me the best chance, if I have them on my team over the entire course of their career, to win the most championships? The fact that there are other guys who just give me more quality years does matter, and it does keep Magic a little bit lower on this list. I know a lot of people will point to the 5 championships, but as we've said many times throughout this list, context is everything when we're talking about team success. It's a team sport. Magic was very impactful, but he had a lot more help than pretty much everybody else who we're talking about in this range.
He did have a lot of help. I have Magic in my number 8 spot. I think where you go with these guys is kind of personal preference more than anything else to me. I've bumped Magic up a few spots, I believe, from the last time that we did this list, and it's just because I think he is such I mean, he's just one of the greatest offensive players ever. I think that if you give me Magic in his 12 seasons, I am getting an offensive engineer. Magic's one of my favorite players to watch, and I love seeing his influence on the game, especially on people like, I immediately think of playing with my dad, running fives, like in old heads, like the flash of the passes and the shit that he does, the no looks, the deception with the ball. It's awesome. It's so much fun, and like he inspired, I think, a lot of hoopers. And I think you bring up some good points about his offensive game. I think he gets really underrated as a scorer. For one, like you mentioned, the jump shot may be a little herky jerky, a little janky, a little funny looking, but it was pure from the mid-range. Magic had a really easy go-to shot. That little post hook, man, he gets a little body on him, and there's a lot of little bodies. You know, again, Magic was one of the first big guards, a 6'9" ball handler, so that led to a lot of kind of baked-in mismatches because, he had that size advantage, and so he's able to get to that hook shot really, really easy. I guess I'll let the cat out of the bag on who I have behind Magic in my 9 spot because I want to get into this argument. I agree with you on the defense point about Magic, and I agree on the help point and a lot of this stuff. I just value Magic's offensive impact and playmaking value so much that I put him here at the 8 spot. I just think that he enhances all of his teammates. It's what you said about the easy. It's so easy. He gets out on the break. He gives you a couple of ball fakes. Boom, he's hitting the guy on the baseline for an easy layup. Like flying down the court with a hit-ahead pass. Boom, easy layup. Like Magic is just going to make the game. I still believe Magic is the all-time NBA assist per game leader. Like he's going to spoon feed his teammates. He's, in my opinion, just one of the greatest offensive engines of all time, and I really value that skills.
Yeah, I think this is a totally reasonable range to have, Magic. I totally see the case. It does just come back to, again, thinking that Hakeem peaked higher when you're talking about all-time great playoff scorer, all-time great defender, and just the extent to which he carried those teams. And I do think that the longevity edge for Hakeem helps as well. And I understand if you think about the way these guys used to be talked about, and I think this has changed some, but it's like they were in different tiers in terms of most people's all-time rankings. Like Magic would be top 4 and Hakeem would be like a little bit outside the top 10. I think that's pretty much it. I think it's pretty much not appreciating all of the support that Magic had around him and not appreciating how little support Hakeem had around him. But I really do think getting those 94 and 95 teams to win back-to-back is just the ultimate testament to how undeniably great Hakeem was, how monstrously impactful he was on both sides of the ball. And so I see the edge for Magic, but again, I do think the all-time great defensive anchor who can also be this monstrous playoff scorer is a really impactful formula. But, Logan, you've been hinting at it a little bit. Who's in your 9 spot?
So I've flipped on this, I believe, since the last time that we did this list. It's a time-old debate, and we can have it again if you'd like. I don't have Larry Bird in my 10 spot, everybody. I have Larry Bird in my 9 spot. 1 spot.
Not clip farming. He's not clip farming.
I'm not.
This is ethical ranking.
I used to make the argument that because of Larry's total impact, the defense, the playmaking, the scoring value, that I prefer Larry's winning skill set and his ability to fit in anywhere, and I still really do think it's valuable, right? Like, Larry's still in my top 10. He's only 1 spot behind Magic. And Larry, we're talking about with Hakeem, Larry comes into, I think a sub-30 win team and immediately turns Boston into a 61 win team his first year. Larry's impact is transformative to the Celtics from the jump, the second that he sets foot on the team. And I think that context is very important when talking about Larry. In comparison to Magic specifically, I think their longevity is very, very similar to one another, right? As Magic is going out, Larry is starting to deal with the debilitating back issues that force him out of the league, right, and lessen his impact. And I still do think Larry has the edge in terms of malleability and ability to fit alongside any team and any kind of skill sets and all of that. Mm-hmm. But I still think Larry also had a bunch of help. When we're talking about the help that Magic was privileged to have throughout his career, I think Larry was too. Kevin McHale, I think I would actually we had this debate earlier on my list. One of the things I would change, I would have put McHale on my top 50. I would make that adjustment. But he also has the privilege of playing with a guy like Robert Parrish. He has the privilege of playing with Danny Ainge, some decent benches there throughout in Boston, and Dennis Johnson. Like, those teams were really great throughout the 80s. I think both of these guys had a bunch of help. It's just more of a philosophical feeling that I have grown to, where I just value Magic's ability to enhance all of his teammates, in my opinion, a little bit more and make offense a little bit easier than Larry. And I think Larry makes offense really, really easy too. Larry's an all-time playmaker, an all-time connective passer, and so he doesn't have that same kind of a flash and sexiness that maybe some of Magic's passing comes with it, but he'd certainly...
I don't know, man.
Just saying that... No, he does, but I'm saying Magic is this, fake here, no look. Like, it's a little sexier than Larry, where it's not as...
Larry's passes are pretty ridiculously sexy, bro. I mean, I think there's an argument they are the two most creative passers in NBA history.
I think they are, too. I think there's a little bit more deception and creativity with Magic's. Like, I think Magic's just in a tier of his own when it comes to the creativity and creation. But I think Larry's great there. I'm just saying that I think Magic's still in a class of his own. And they both make offense much easier for their teams. I think I prefer Magic's just offensive engine. The fact that I know that I'm going to put the ball in his hands, that he can take on the volume, that he is going to make us a great offense in transition and in the fast break. And I can say these things about Larry, too. It's very, very marginal. These guys are right next to one another. Even before we started this show, I debated having Larry again above Magic. I've made the argument for Larry in the past. Again, it's a philosophical difference, and I'm going to go with Magic here. Again, I think their careers are so similar, man. And I mean, they've been having this debate since these two guys were in college playing against each other in the national title game. So it is an argument literally as old as time. I have migrated to the Magic side, and I have Magic one spot above Larry. Larry in my 9th spot, Magic in my 8th spot.
It's totally fair. I feel like they belong side by side, holding hands on any list. Like, I think regardless of what your criteria is, you're going to wind up with these guys pretty much next to each other. Now, maybe you're higher on both of them, maybe you're lower on both of them, but it's tough for me to see any consistent criteria that puts a real gap between Larry and Magic. I do have Larry in my 9th spot, and I do slightly prefer his case to Magic's. It's really close, but the one thing that I do feel pretty strongly about is that Larry peaked higher. And if you want to say, okay, but Magic is still giving me elite seasons from 89 to 91 when Bird's body has started to fail him, Larry was still really good when he was on the court, but he was not the same monumental all-time great player at that point. He was no longer a superstar. I would hear that case, but I do think Larry peaked higher between the two of them, and I think he got to that best in the world level faster.
Is it the two-way edge? Is that what does it for you with Larry?
That's pretty much what it comes down to. I think that Magic is the slightly better offensive player, but I also think that Larry Bird had a top 8 offensive peak in NBA history, and every single year was propelling the Celtics to be a top 3 offense, and actually between the two of them led the best single offense that either the Celtics or Showtime Lakers ever posted. That was the 88 Celtics, who are a top 10 relative offense in NBA history. And then it does matter to me that Larry actually found a way to carve out positive value defensively. Did he ever deserve to make 3 all-defense teams like he did? I would say no, but he was an elite rebounder defensively, and I do think that he was an actual plus at his defensive peak. He had really good hands. He did actually offer some secondary rim protection. He was a very strong, good positional defender, very high IQ, and so obviously his lack of high-end athleticism held back his defensive impact, but he was a legitimately important part of the Celtics consistently turning out really good defenses, and that was an edge that the Celtics had over the Lakers over the years, the fact that they were more often the elite defenses. I also think the Celtics as a team reached a higher height than the Lakers. I think the 86 Celtics are the best team of the decade because I think they reached the highest two-way level. But again, the Lakers and Magic just hung around in those elite conversations for a little bit longer at the end of the decade and even through 91. So that's why I think there's an argument for both sides. I agree with you that Larry also had a lot of help, but I do think that Magic had more. And I do think what Larry did immediately as a rookie is a huge testament to his impact, joining a 29-win team that was bottom 4 on both sides of the ball, making them a 61-win team that was top 4 on both sides of the ball, taking them from second to last in net rating to number 1 in net rating without major changes elsewhere on that roster. Like, it is really incredible that Larry got the 1980 Celtics specifically to be as great as they were, because yes, there's other talent on that team with Nate Tiny Archibald and Cornbread Maxwell, and you still have old Dave Cowens hanging around, and he was pretty good, but you don't have Parrish yet. And McHale, you don't even have in the league yet, and he obviously is still years away from blossoming, but Larry was getting his team to win 60-plus games every year because he was such an elite offensive engine and he was that plus defender. So I think from 80 to 88, he's a top 3 player the entire time. I would argue he was already there as a rookie, and I think he's best in the world arguably all the way from 82 to 87, 84 to 86, he clearly has that title. Even 82 and 83, I prefer his overall impact to Moses for sure. We already talked about some of my issues with Moses. I think I prefer it to Kareem. And so that's a pretty good sized run where he was best in the world. And I think he made a good case for that title even before he was at his absolute best individually. But then you do look at the peak, like the true peak for Larry, and it's just absolutely monstrous. Like 84 to 88, this is a guy who regular season and playoffs both is basically giving you 27, 10, and 7 on like +4, +5% relative true shooting. And I do think in terms of the build, it is just a little bit easier to work with Larry than Magic. Now, it's pretty easy to put an all-time great team around either one of these guys, but once we are nitpicking, and again, looking at the small differences that might put one of these guys above the other, I do think that Larry is like a really unique piece to build around because offensively, he's just so ridiculously versatile. He's an all-time great shot maker in so many different ways, like out of the post, facing up, back to the basket, out of isolation. And then as an off-ball scorer, he's just a monster. If it's spotting up, if it's curling off screens, really awesome off-ball mover and cutter. So like one of those guys who is just constantly stressing a defense off-ball, good offensive rebounder for the position, and Magic is as well. So that's something that they both have in common. But the scoring heights that Larry reached both on and off ball, combined with the really genius passing. I do think he's one of the absolute greatest passers to ever play. And what I love so much about Larry's offense is his ability to be a constant threat in any way you need him and just feel the game, man. Like, Magic dominated the ball and it led to all-time great offenses, so I don't hold that against him at all. It's more just a bonus for Larry that he could contribute in so many ways, and whatever you needed him to do offensively, he could do it. He was an immaculate decision maker. He was the greatest touch passer in the history of the game. Like, when you think about .5 basketball, quick decision making, supreme vision and creativity, that's Larry Bird. He was also a brilliant outlet passer and a brilliant transition playmaker like Magic was. He was a really inventive passer as a driver. And so he could kill you out of pick and roll. He could kill you out of the post. And I think about some of the teams that he elevated to being these really elite offenses. And I do just think it's a bit more impressive than Magic. Like, playing with a shooting liability point guard for so many years in Dennis Johnson, and yet being able to complement his game so well, where he just had such supreme feel, and those two actually just generally really connected on the court. Being asked to play alongside two bigs, and yeah, they were two stud bigs, but like, Larry was a true 6'9" guy. And so the expectation was this is going to be a power forward, but he was such a brilliantly skilled player that he could dominate at both the 3 and the 4. I think the value of that can't really be overstated. Like, that's where I think he just has a bit of an edge over Magic. I think there are a number of different lineups that Larry can make work that are really unique. And so those are really all the reasons that I prefer him. I think a bit more versatile offensively and in terms of the overall team build. He does have the plus defense. I do think he has the higher peak, and I do think he led to comparable team success with less help. Again, he still had help. He still played in the greatest front court in NBA history, and he was the biggest part of that. He never played with a guy like Kareem, that's for sure. His teams weren't quite as successful when he missed time as Magic's Lakers were, but they were still pretty good. They won 74% of the games that he played. They also won almost 54% of the games that he missed, and so this is why I prefer Bird slightly, but I feel like they really do belong back to back on any list because the peaks are really high for both of them, and they were the faces of two of the most iconic dynasties ever, and they were so successful in terms of their team's dominance. But when you isolate their impact over a career, they do both lack strong longevity. Larry gives you a really awesome decade, but then he does tail off at the end. And I mean, he's still good when he's on the court, but he tails off at the end because of health. Both these guys, very fortunate in terms of team surroundings, especially Magic, but Bird as well. Both of them have relatively limited defensive impact. That's more so with Magic. Again, Bird was a plus defender, but you're going to see there's just some two-way monsters above him. And so that's where I think this is the right range for these guys. Somewhere between 8 and 10. I know historically a lot of people would have them higher. I had them higher a few years ago, but I do think when you consider the total value added over a career, there are some ways in which they were fortunate that allowed them to lead to such dominant team success. And obviously they're incredible players, but it's like some guys just weren't that lucky throughout the course of their careers.
Yeah, and there are some guys that I prefer in terms of longevity, and there's some other guys that I prefer in terms of two-way ability, and there's some guys that just check both of those boxes, and that's really why they can't be higher. And, you know, some have even called Larry Bird a top 10 scorer of all time.
Some have. Some have dared to go there, Logan.
Yeah.
I may be looking at them. But we agree in terms of the names who fall in the 8 through 10 slots. Who do you have at number 7?
So we are creeping to probably my most explosive take of the episode. We will see how the people feel about that. In my number 7 spot, this is where I have Shaquille O'Neal.
Okay.
I think Shaq has one of the absolute highest peaks in NBA history, and I would call Shaq inevitable. Like, I think that if you give me Shaq on my team out of the gates for a decade, I'm getting 2 to 3 chips. It don't matter. I am finding a way to... We are going to win a title. Joe Namath style, I guarantee it. At least one. But I think Shaq is just so easy to build around. And I think that some aspects of Shaq's game can kind of get underrated because of what you think about Shaq in your brain, right? You think of this just absolute monster powerhouse kind of tank, bowling over guys, going through them, yamming on people. And of course, there's a lot of that, right? Like Shaq is dominant, completely unstoppable. Like I said, an inevitable interior force. And it's a lot of that. I mean, you couldn't front the guy because if he caught the ball behind you, he's yamming it. You couldn't stay behind him because he's going to put you in the basket. You can't trap the guy. You can't double him. Like, there was just nothing you could really do with Shaq on the inside. And if you swarm him and he misses the shot, God forbid, he's going to grab his own board and he's going to immediately go right back up with that thing and dunk it. Like, there wasn't really a smart way to go about dealing with Shaq at his peak in his prime. And like I said, I think there's some qualities of Shaq's game that kind of get underrated. I think he had some underrated skill and touch. He did have some post hooks that he could turn to, some of those little flip shots. I thought he was an underrated passer and decision maker. Could get up near 3 or 4 assists per game in the playoffs. And when teams did double him, could kick out to guys and make them pay. I think underrated mobility and agility, where you're seeing him as a pick and roll or rumbling to the basket in space, getting up and down the floor, running in transition. Of course, in Orlando, he has some of that. It's still there in LA. Obviously not what he was there in terms of mobility, but it's not completely gone and dissolved by his peak and prime. And a ferocious, imposing rim protector. I think sometimes Shaq can get a little bit overrated defensively because the one knock that I would have on him is that his motor wasn't always going, right? Shaq was a guy that could take possessions off, but was a guy that would give you 2 to 3 blocks per game routinely in the regular season and the playoffs. Very, very valuable in terms of two-way impact. And like I said, one of the absolute highest peaks in NBA history. The 2000 NBA Finals, brace yourself, I'm going to throw a lot of numbers at you. 38 points, 17 boards, 2 assists a night on 61% from the field with over 2.5 blocks per game. That's on 7'4" Rick Smits dominating him. The 01 NBA Finals, 33, 16, and 5 points, rebounds, assists on 57% from the field with nearly 3.5 blocks per game. That is on Dikembe Mutombo, the reigning Defensive Player of the Year with Philadelphia. And in those playoffs, Philadelphia had a defensive rating of 103.7 with Dikembe and a defensive rating of 117.7 without him. A 14-point defensive swing with Dikembe on versus off. Shaq just babied him, man. Took him to school. 02 NBA Finals, 36 points, 12 boards, 4 assists on 60% from the field with nearly 3 blocks per game. That is on the 02 New Jersey Nets, the number 1 defense in basketball that you're granted. They did not have great personnel to deal with the likes of Shaq, right?
Yeah.
But dominated them. So over the course of those 3 years in the NBA Finals, right, theoretically against the best competition you're going to run into, he's given you 36 points, 15 rebounds, and 3.5 assists a night on nearly 60% from the field with 3 blocks a night. Like, it's just one of the all-time great peaks in NBA history. The only reason that Shaq isn't higher is just the longevity. It is the fact that by 2005, I think Shaq has turned a corner in terms of, really being in his prime. And he's still good. He's still serviceable in Miami. He's okay in Phoenix and in Cleveland. He's done by the time he gets to Boston. But it's really the fact that there are other guys that are longevity giants and longevity titans. And I feel that even though Shaq may have peaked higher than these guys, it's arguable he probably did. I am still getting more value out of these guys over the next 5 to 10 years. I've made the argument for Shaq higher. I really do value the longevity of the other guys and the totality of one of these guys' skill sets, the complete offensive impact that I'm getting from one of my players. I'm being intentionally vague about the names that I have above him right now, but I settled on Shaq in the 7th spot. I think that Shaq has, again, one of the absolute highest peaks and primes in NBA history. I think you are guaranteed to win a championship or multiple championships if you give me Shaq for the first decade of his career. He is impossible to deal with. But there are some guys that I think surpass him in terms of longevity, and that's really the only reason why he's not higher than 7 for me.
Well, I'm interested in seeing the Jeff Hornacek case because we all know that he's coming. With where you had Malone and where you had Stockton, you have to have Jeff
I actually
Hornacek
have Naz
in your
Reid
top
and
6.
Wally Szczerbiak in my top 6.
Naz Reid. I have Shaq at number 5. I just think he's too dominant to have any lower. And I think maybe you're underrating the longevity because the longevity is quite
Longevity's
good.
very good. There's just some guys with pretty ridiculous longevity in the grand scheme of things.
Yes, there are, but I think that the longevity is good enough with Shaq when you're talking about a top 3 peak of all time, and you're talking about a guy who was the best player in the world for 4 to 5 years and was a top 5 player for a dozen years and gives you 15 years of star impact because even through 07, he's still a star. Like, I think sometimes people can overrate Miami Shaq, but he was still very impactful at that time. I just think this is where he belongs. The peak, as you said, is one of the most dominant we've ever seen. In terms of a 3-year run in the playoffs, it is in a range that is only comparable to Michael Jordan and LeBron James. He just absolutely obliterated the league over and over and over again. And I am just so high on his offense at his best. Such an absolute offensive monster and really a uniquely great offensive engine for being a big man in a way that I think is even a little bit different from a Kareem in terms of the levels of defensive attention that he demanded, is pretty dramatically different even from an Hakeem in terms of, again, the defensive attention he's drawing, the scoring efficiency heights that he can reach, the playmaking value is greater. He was an unstoppable post scorer because, as you mentioned, he is the single strongest player to ever exist in the NBA, but also underrated agility and footwork and body control, underrated touch. The Shaq hook shot was such an effective go-to move for him. And so he is just impossible to stop in single coverage, like more so than any other player in the history of this game. Shaq, single coverage, out of the post, you're dead. So what defenses do is react to that threat in a way that is as extreme as any that we've ever seen. There are two players who have distorted, who have reshaped a defense more than anybody else, and it's what Shaq has done with his interior threat, and it's what Steph has done with his perimeter threat. And the incredible thing about both of these guys is they both have a massive impact on enhancing their team's offense, both inside the paint and beyond the three-point line. So when it comes to manufacturing the two most valuable shots, both of their presences are insanely valuable, because when we talk about Steph, well, obviously his three-point shooting is going to boost his team's three-point offense in a massive way, but also the three-point shooting threat, drawing people out into space, drawing multiple bodies out on the perimeter, is going to open up paint scoring opportunities for his teammates in a unique way. What Shaq did, his paint scoring obviously provides a huge boost to his team's paint offense, but also his paint scoring threat and all of the bodies that he's drawing makes his team's three-point offense much better, because he's enhancing the shot quality from the perimeter by so much. One of the coolest numbers, I think, that speaks to Shaq's offensive impact is from 2001 to 2004 in LA, and this is when we start to get the data that is this granular. His team shot 4.5% better from three with him on the floor, because their shot quality is that much higher. And again, that's not even what we think of as being his first impact, because their rim frequency and their rim efficiency are also both jumping by 10% plus with him on the court. And so I talk about the post scoring, but that's just part of why he is the most dominant interior force in NBA history. He was an elite play finisher. He was a dominant offensive rebounder. He was a plus passer, as you're saying, and you just can't overstate the value of drawing 2 to 3 bodies in the paint constantly. Like, just watch how Shaq was guarded. Watch how teams would play so far off of perimeter players just to deny an entry pass. Watch how recklessly they would double team him and leave anybody else wide open. Like, that is why he led to so many dominant offenses, and he did it from the jump. 2000 to 02 Shaq, top 3 peak in NBA history, but when he comes into the league in Orlando, he's immediately a top 5 player. He joins a 21-win team. He improves their offense by 5 points in terms of offensive rating as a rookie. You pair him with Penny the next year, and now they're a top 3 offense every year for the rest of his tenure in Orlando. Then he goes to LA. And I think the most underrated part of Shaq's resume is what he did in 1998 and 1999, because I believe he was already pretty clearly the best player in the NBA. By that point, the team around him just wasn't ready yet. Kobe hadn't matured yet. And by the way, Kobe wasn't fully mature in 2000. Kobe wasn't very good in that run. Shaq was just so undeniable that they still got through. But in 98 and 99, Shaq leads elite back-to-back top 2 offenses. They go 77 and 32 with them. He's improving them by like 12 points per 100 possessions when he's on the court. That was already the most dominant force in the sport. Then 2000, he gets even better. He reaches his defensive peak in that 2000 regular season when he anchors the number 1 defense in basketball. In the 01 playoffs, he anchors the number 1 playoff defense. Now there is a rigidity with Shaq defensively for sure, because of his lack of mobility, because of his inconsistent engagement at times, but he was a monster rim protector. He was a monster defensive rebounder. And so he's a very good defensive big at his best, who is very arguably the greatest offensive big in NBA history. I would take Jokic, but in terms of the playoff translatability and in terms of just the unstoppable nature of Shaq, like, he makes a very good argument, and there's a lot of evidence to support that. So I think you're talking about a guy who brought you unstoppable playoff offense, strong defense, and just repeatedly showed that in his prime years, he was going to make you an elite offense. He was going to make you an elite team. He didn't need that much help around him. I think there's an inclination to think, oh, Shaq needed the great guard to unlock him. He needed a Penny, or he needed a Kobe, or he needed a Dwayne Wade. But if you look at the results, in the years that Shaq and Kobe were teammates in LA, Shaq went 41 and 12 in games without Kobe. Meanwhile, the Lakers were just slightly above 500 in games without Shaq. But when Shaq played without his star running mate, the Lakers were still essentially unbeatable. Over those years, 2001 to 2004 specifically, they were a plus 5.5 net team when Shaq played without Kobe. They were a negative 2.3 net team when Kobe played without Shaq. So I talked about this some when we discussed Kobe, but I just want to make sure that Shaq gets the appropriate amount of credit for how clearly he was the best player on those teams, how clearly he was the best, most dominant force in the NBA. So the Lakers years are obviously his strongest, but even with the Heat, I think 2005, he did not deserve MVP. Absolutely, Steve Nash deserved it. I think 2006, Dwayne Wade was the best team on that title team by far. But there was still, just because of his size and physical force, that sort of implicit value when Shaq is on the court. That rim protection value, that rebounding value, that paint scoring threat value. He had certainly diminished, but even over those Miami years, 05 to 07, the Heat won 70% of their games with Shaq, just 47% without him. They were still quite good in the Shaq minutes without D Wade even, and so that's where I do still think you're looking at star impact in those years. So as I said, 15 years of star impact, a dozen years as a top 5 guy, 4 to 5 years as the best guy in the world, one of the very highest peaks in NBA history. I think you put it all together, and this is a top 5 player we've ever seen. And I will say, I mean, the on-off stuff with him is really strong. 97 to 07, his teams were more than 10 points better with him on the court. They were +9 in terms of net rating when he was on the court. Like, he was just such a dominant force for so long. And I know who you're going to have above him. We can have those specific conversations. But to me, the combination of insane peak with very good longevity that Shaq has puts him above a couple of these other guys.
I mean, I do think the team build around him is very easy, but I think that also applies to these other two, and I think it's just slightly, for me, offset by I just think they have absurd longevity and impact even into their later years. When Shaq was a little bit more washed, and I don't want to characterize it like he was completely done. Shaq was still even effective, later on. I think these guys were a little bit more effective, and that does matter to me.
Let me ask you something, because let's just talk about it out in the open. Versus Steph Curry.
Yes.
Because Duncan has better longevity than Shaq. Inarguable.
You have
what
Duncan,
I think you have to
Shaq.
consider, I do. What I think you have to consider with Steph is Steph at 38 is infinitely better than Shaq at 38.
Yes, that matters to me.
Shaq at 20 was a dominant force. Steph Curry wasn't in the NBA yet. And so I think longevity isn't just, are you still good when you're really old? It's how many star seasons you give me.
Yeah,
and that's where I think it's actually
Steph has
a wash. I think it's about 15
Steph has
for
more.
both of them.
I think Steph has a few more, and that matters to me.
A few?
And yeah, I'd say 2 more. Yeah, like 2 more years now.
Okay. 2, I think you can argue. I think it depends on how you value 06 and 07 for Shaq, but I think that's pretty much a wash when it comes to longevity, just because, again, Steph's first 3 years in the league, he's good when he's on the court, but he doesn't become a star until
like
he's
2015.
24 years old.
I'd say
2013, Steph is.
Well, I'm not saying so. I'm saying peak. Steph is at his peak in 2015, hits it and sustains for, that's when he is leading out, like a top 3 offense in basketball.
That's when his real prime starts.
Yes, and he's still kicking and leading out to elite team offense today. And again, it's a philosophical difference where, I just think that is the most valuable thing you can do for me. And I understand. I have made the argument for Shaq in the past where I've gone absurd peak, all-time super peak, two-way value, very good longevity. I just think the team build around Steph Curry, how easy he makes offense for his teammates. I think he makes offense even easier for his teammates than a guy like Shaq. You can make the argument for Shaq. I would hear it. I think Steph makes it even easier. I think Steph has been doing it for a little bit longer than Shaq, and he is still doing it now. I should have had Steph in my top 10 scorers episode. He should have been very high on that list. Steph is just the guy that when I was going back and making this list, and I am just sitting here in awe going, what a privilege it has been to watch this guy, and holy shit, he is still doing it and still impacting team offense at an absurd level. This one was one of the toughest decisions. I went back and forth on, should I have Shaq above him? Should I have Steph above him? I am going to go with Steph, and above everything else, it is that I think that their impact on team offense is very, very similar. I just think Steph has been doing it slightly longer. And I do think I agree with what you're making, the point that you're making about Shaq's early years. I think they get underrated. Shaq came into the league and was a fucking beast, man. Like day one, Orlando, monster. And I think, like you're saying, I think the early Lakers years get underrated. But to me, the fact that Steph is still doing it and has been doing it for so long kind of offsets it a little bit, where it's super close between these two guys. But I do go with Steph. I think the longevity is fucking absurd. And if he comes out and has another classic year where he's leading out, a great offense with him on the court, it's icing on the cake at this point for Steph.
It's just tough for me to view that as a meaningful advantage for Steph when it's like Shaq gave you 14 All-NBA seasons. Like his longevity is really good. And I think these are two of the greatest offensive players ever. I think that Steph is the better offensive player of the two, but I think that Shaq is still a top 7 offensive player in NBA history who was a real impact defender at his best. And that's where it's tough for me to see Steph's peak in the same range with Shaq. Shaq was leading dominant all-time great offenses, and he was anchoring awesome defenses as a really important part of them. Steph, we know, can lead to all-time offense, but he has always been a low-impact defender, at times been a liability defensively. So that's the difference for me. As much as I love Steph, I have him at number 7. I don't think his peak is comparable to Shaq's because I think that very few peaks are, but I do think his peak is very high, and I do think he is possibly the greatest offensive ceiling raiser in NBA history. You could argue the greatest offensive player in NBA history, and an outstanding offensive floor raiser. Like, he's Steph. He's just one of the greatest offensive players in NBA history, and his impact on that side of the ball is so remarkable and has been sustained for so long that even as a low-impact defender, he belongs this high. Since 2012, Logan, when Steph Curry plays basketball for the Warriors, they are 625 and 290. They win 68% of their games. When Steph Curry doesn't play for the Warriors, they are 100 and 172. They win 36.8% of their games. Like, it's just remarkable how transformative he is offensively. He has, over that time, a plus 11 on-off swing, and the Warriors are a plus 10 net team when he's on the court, and we have just seen so many times over and over again how utterly essential, how beyond comparison Steph is as an offensive player for this team. Like, literally, just look at every year since 2012 in which he's missed significant time. So that year, they were 13 and 13 when Steph played. They were 10 and 30 without him. Then he comes back the next season, and what does he do? He leads them to be a very good offense in a playoff team, and he has really his star breakout. 2018, this is a team that also has Kevin Durant, right? When Steph plays, they're unbeatable. They're 41 and 10. When Steph doesn't play, they're 17 and 14 without him, which stands in stark contrast to the previous year when KD missed time, and as long as Steph was on the court, they were unbeatable. The inverse was not the case. 2020, of course, Steph misses basically the entire season, and the Warriors are the single worst team in the league without him. 2021, he comes back, and it is still a joke of a squad. Klay Thompson has not returned. Jordan Poole is a disaster. Like, that team was starting James Wiseman, and Michael Mulder was playing for them. Like, they sucked. And when Steph played, they were 37 and 26. When he didn't play, they were 2 and 7. It's one of the most miserable offensive supporting cast I've ever seen, and Steph was somehow able to carry them to being a good offense in the minutes when he was on the court. When he was off the court, they were a catastrophically bad offense, and he did it with crazy volume scoring at crazy efficiency, pick and roll heavy offense, a little bit different from what we had seen from him in previous years, just because he had to take on a bigger load than he ever had before, and he did. 2022, the Warriors go 45 and 19 with Steph. They're just 8 and 10 without him, but of course, he is incredible in that playoff run, and they win the title. Even this past year, Logan, the Warriors were 24 and 19 when Steph played. Somehow, that team that lacks just about everything, and this has been the case for the entire 2020s pretty much. You look at the group around him and you're like, they don't have much ball handling. They don't have much athleticism. They don't have very much shooting. They don't have good bigs. They don't really have good play finishers. Put Steph Curry on the court, And he is such a mind-bending, constant threat to a defense. His off-ball value is so uniquely incredible. His spacing value is so uniquely incredible that he is going to enhance the shot quality for his teammates in a way that maybe surpasses what we've seen from anybody else in NBA history. And it's why, even without massive assist numbers, there is a legitimate case that Steph is the most impactful playmaker in NBA history when you talk about, again, enhancing his teammates' shot quality and offense. Like, the three-point shooting is obvious, but year after year, we see him have a significant impact on his team's rim volume and their rim efficiency when he's on the court. And again, when you talk about isolating, who is the driving force of these great teams? Okay, yes, Shaq had Kobe, but guess what? When Shaq played without Kobe, they were dominant. When Kobe played without Shaq, they were just okay. We see the same story with Steph and KD in the years that they were together. When Steph played without KD, the Warriors were 27-4. And in minutes that Steph played without KD, they had a plus 13.5 net rating. Absolutely dominant. When KD played without Steph, they were just 23-17. And in all those minutes, they had just a plus 3 net rating. And you know what is really insane, Logan, and just another remarkable point in Steph's favor when it comes to his impact? When all three of his other star teammates were on. So when KD, Clay, and Dre were all on, but Steph was off, the Warriors were just a plus 2 net team over those years. They were good, they were above average, but they were far from great. When Steph was on, with any combination of those guys off, with KD and Clay off, or with KD and Dre off, they're still a plus 12 net team. So again, we think, oh my God, he played on the most stacked teams ever. And yes, those teams were stacked. It was completely unfair that they got Kevin Durant. But why were they so dominant? Steph Curry, were they ever dominant without him, even with all those other guys? No. Were they always dominant with him, even without those other guys? Yes, like, he is preposterously easy to build around. We have seen them put, again, limited rosters in so many ways. We have seen them ask him to play with multiple non-shooting bigs. We have seen them ask him to play with limited creators, and his offensive impact is so monumental. And it's not just the gravity, it's also the fact that this guy is always a hyper-efficient 27 to 30 point per game scorer. Like, it's not just the threat of his scoring, it is also all-time great scoring. It's just remarkable what he does to carry teams still to this day. Also, his playoff resume, underratedly elite. Gave you 27, 5, and 6 on plus 5% relative true shooting in his playoff career. Should have been Finals MVP in 2015. That's an incredible run that gets underrated. His runs in 2017 and 18 get underrated because he didn't win Finals MVP, but he was really good overall. 2019, he almost carried that team to a title still, even without Kevin Durant and with Klay Thompson going down with injury. 2022 was an incredible run. What he did in 2023 was very impressive, right? Carrying that team through a playoff series. What he did in 2025 even. Again, how he bent the defense. The Warriors' offensive rating in that playoff run, and we're talking about 37-year-old Steph, was 18 points better when he was on the court. The Rockets said, we don't care about anybody else's existence. We only care about stopping Steph Curry, and what that does for his teammates can't be overstated. So the peak is high. The playoff resume is fantastic. And his longevity has become a real strength in his case. And that's what has just continued to move Steph up for me. I think every year that he continues to stack up, where he's still a top 7 player when healthy, and you can say, oh, but he's not available for the full season. He's available enough. And every year he shows you how insanely valuable he is just by how much he improves this team when he's on the court, still carrying those offenses, still in the 2020s, improving his team's offensive rating by 9 points when he's on the court, still averaging 26 points per game after turning 35, which is easily the most ever by a guard. Like, 15 years of monstrous offensive impact from Steph. I do think you could argue him higher than this. Again, Shaq is where I draw the line, and I do think that Steph belongs at number 7, but man, I mean, there's just so much that is so incredibly strong about his case, and it's just all predicated upon GOAT-level offense.
Yeah, it's just so easy around him. I mean, that's
It is.
really the theme, and that's why, like, I've got Magic up so high, why I've got Shaq, like Steph, like, it's so easy around all these guys. And I still think Steph gets underrated in that regard, man. Like, I think that we're going to look, just going back on his basketball reference page, man, like, I almost was in awe, just like, holy shit, he has been doing this for so long.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know that I've been, conscious and alive for it all. Like, you can kind of take it for granted. Then when I look at all the years stacked up together, it is baffling. It is incredible that he is still this impactful at this age, and he can do it on ball and off ball, and how just he constantly stresses a defense. I just think the impact is there when you dive into all the numbers and all the analytics like you just laid out, man. Like, the track record is so consistent. And again, he keeps doing this. Like, I think this is right now, I have drawn a line. Like, I don't know how much higher he can climb than this at 6, but again, I don't know. If he's still doing this in a year or two, maybe he will go up for me, man. I don't know. Like, I can't write it off.
No, dude, and this is what I'm saying. Like, again, at this moment, I can't view his longevity as a meaningful enough edge over Shaq, who I think clearly peaked higher and also has really strong longevity. If Steph at 40 years old is still a top 10 player, yeah, he can crack the top 5. And this is where, I know I always get on my soapbox and talk about this, but the Warriors just need to do him justice. They need to go get him LeBron. They just need to put a roster that can contend around him, because every year of the 2020s, excluding 2020 when he didn't play, he has been at that level individually. And every year outside of 2022, they have failed to put the team around him. And even in 2022, it's very impressive that Steph won that title. A lot of guys stepped up and played some of their best basketball in that run. But man, the impact is just so absurd. And like, I didn't even talk specifically about 2016, but it's the greatest offensive regular season in NBA history. And it's just hilarious. You look at the on-off numbers from 2014 to 2019, and the Warriors were a plus 15 net team when Steph was on, and they were 17 points better with him on compared to off. And like, all of that impact is offensive. That's how insanely transformative he was on that side of the ball. And the Warriors in those years put a lot of really good defenses around him. And I always make sure to give Draymond Green his credit, because I think he remains one of the most underrated players ever. But again, Steph's unique offensive threat allows them to prioritize defense in terms of their roster build, as they've done over and over again. And then it's just Steph carry us offensively, especially in the later years. I mean, he's been really carrying. He had help in the late 2010s, but still, he was the engine. He was the driving force. He was the all-time great, and he is still a monster. So, Steph, keep climbing, man. I mean, you certainly have my blessing. He's my favorite player ever, but I do land with him at number 7. Who do you have at number 6, Logan?
At 6 is where I have Steph. Are you struggling to get ahead financially each month? Are you tired of your old debit card with no perks, benefits, or advantages? If that sounds like you, then I've got good news, because you can maximize your money with Cash App.
Cash App can do way more than you think to make your money work for you. If you direct deposit at least $300 in paychecks each month and use the Cash App card for purchases, you can earn interest on your savings. No hidden fees, no minimum balance requirements. Also, you can hit your savings goals even faster by turning on roundups on your Cash App card. With roundups, every purchase you make using the card is rounded up to the nearest dollar, and that spare change is automatically put into your savings. Don't let your money sit around and gather dust. Make it work for you. Take advantage of interest savings on Cash App today.
New Cash App customers can earn $10 if they use code CashApp10 in their profile at sign up, and send $5 to a friend within 14 days. Terms apply.
Cash App is a financial services platform, not a bank. Banking services provided by Cash App's bank partners. Prepaid debit cards issued by Sutton Bank, member FDIC. Cash App Visa Debit Flex Card issued by Sutton Bank, member FDIC, and the Bancorp Bank, N.A., pursuant to a license from Visa USA, Inc. See terms and conditions for the Sutton Prepaid Card, Sutton Debit Flex Card, and Bancorp Debit Flex Card. Cash App Green features, savings, direct deposit roundups, overdraft coverage, and discounts provided by Cash App, a Block Inc. brand. Visit cash.app/legal/podcast for full disclosures. Okay, so we can transition from my favorite player ever to my favorite player growing up. And I don't think he's many people's favorite player, but God, did I love him. I have Tim Duncan at number 6, Logan. And his case is not sexy, but it is
dude,
strong.
I wish you could,
Yeah.
I wish you could. That is the first 2 words I wrote underneath Tim Duncan. Not sexy.
Probably the least original thing that has ever been said. They literally called this dude the big fundamental, but man, is his case strong. You are talking about a top 3 defender in the history of this game. You are talking about somebody with some of the greatest longevity that we've ever seen, a guy who entered the league as a top 5 player on a contender and leaves 19 years later, still a strong defender, still useful as a passing hub, still a positive two-way player playing an important role on a contender. Like, that is what is so insane about Duncan. He was still good when he left. And by the way, before his literal final season, which was year 19, everything before that is 18 seasons of star impact. Like, it is just incredible how good he was for that long. From 98 to 08, he's a top 5 player. He's the best player in the world in 03, arguably in 02. Him and Shaq both make a good case. And he is still a star again from 2009 to 2015. So you put all that together, and this is a guy who just boosted his team's chances of winning by so much for so long. And it's why he won just about as much as anybody ever. The defense is where his value comes first and foremost. And as we've talked about throughout this list, especially I've talked about, I do think that great defensive players often get underrated. And with Duncan, again, he doesn't have the flash offensively. He doesn't have the offensive peak of a lot of the other guys we're talking about in this range. But he led 11 straight top 3 defenses to start his career, including 5 number 1 defenses, including 3 straight dominant defenses after David Robinson retired. So yes, he walked into this situation where there were 2 great defensive bigs for the Spurs, but as the lone defensive anchor, still leading 2 dominant defenses. In fact, the 2004 Spurs are statistically their best defense ever, one of the very best defenses ever, and that was without Robinson. And then after that, he still anchored another 3 top 3 defenses, and then another 3 top 10 defenses on top of that. Like, the Spurs dynasty was built upon dominant defenses, and those dominant defenses were built first and foremost upon Tim Duncan. He had help defensively, but he was as consistently impactful at a high level on that side of the ball for as long as anybody that we've ever seen. And again, even his defensive skill set isn't sexy, right? It's not Hakeem in terms of the moments of athleticism and the stunning shot blocking and generating steals. And I don't think he was quite as good defensively as Hakeem, but he was close, man. And I think he was just the most perfectly sound help defender of the modern era. His timing, his positioning, phenomenal. He was a really good shot blocker. He was a great deterrent. He was a great rebounder. He was a great post defender. His agility was solid at his best. And so he was this all-around incredible defensive anchor for these monster defenses, and also an underrated offensive player. And I mentioned when we talked about Kevin Garnett and glazed him that I do think KG versus Duncan is a real conversation, and they were just in dramatically different situations in terms of their help. But I do still have Duncan 7 spots higher, and I think the reason for that is that his offense really did translate at another level in the playoffs, and specifically his scoring, his ability to impose himself physically, to have bread and butter post-up offense, to get to the free throw line, whereas KG, in very bad situations, did experience a real playoff drop. Duncan was still able to really deliver in terms of playoff offense when you're talking about him at his peak. Like 2001 to 2003, Duncan in the playoffs, it's just so monstrous what he's doing on both sides of the ball. But he was a very skilled post scorer. Of course, people always think of the bank shot, the quintessential go-to move for who many consider the most boring superstar ever. But the ability as a face-up player to use jabs to create space, and I do think his agility at his peak is underrated. Like, he had good body control. He was a pretty good driving big. He had a nice spin move, but good hook shot, good use of fakes and step throughs. Like, he had a pretty good post-scoring bag. And so that was enough to make him a very good playoff scorer, never the most efficient scoring big, never a great play finisher. But again, this is all just secondary to his defensive value. He was good enough offensively to be the number 1 on good offenses in the playoffs because he was a very good playoff scorer. And he was also a pretty good passer, underrated when it comes to dissecting doubles. And so that's where you get this very high peak from Duncan that I think gets underrated, because we do think of him as just Mr. Consistent, and the longevity is the hallmark, and then the team success is the hallmark of his case, but he also had a lot of help, right? He was part of a great organization, and that is true. he had more help than most. He didn't have help like Magic did, but Duncan had more help than most. Tony Parker wins a Finals MVP. Manu Ginobili should have won a Finals MVP. Those are a couple of star-level players who he was paired with for a long time. He had a great coach. But again, he was the driving force of their success. And in all of the minutes that he played from 01 to 07, without Tony Parker, the Spurs were a plus 12 net team. You invert that, you look at the Parker minutes without Duncan, they're an even net team. So he was the driving force in their dominance, and I always look to the 01 to 03 seasons as the greatest testament to Duncan and his peak, because those are years when he really had very little help by the standards of an elite team. David Robinson was still a very good defensive player in 01 and 02, but his offensive role was much diminished at that point. By 03, he was just a shell of himself. It was his last year in the league. You look at the 03 run, Tony Parker is super inefficient. Manu isn't really ready yet to be a high-impact player, and there just wasn't much help. And in 01 and 02, I always like to talk about Antonio Daniels and Derek Anderson being like a couple of his highest scoring teammates, and yet all of those years, he's still cranking out 58 to 60 win seasons, and he is leading dominant defenses and top 8 offenses, and in the playoffs over those years, averages 25, 15, and 5 on plus 4% relative true shooting, and in 03 has one of the greatest playoff runs in NBA history. Absolutely dominant defense with the best offense of his career. So yes, he had more help than most. In the 2000s overall, the Spurs won 55% of their games without Duncan. That's a high number, but they won 71% of the games with him. And he had a plus 10 on offswing in the decade. Like, he was improving them on both ends of the court by about 5 points in terms of offensive rating, 5 points in terms of defensive rating. That is massive two-way impact, leading good offenses, anchoring historically great defenses. And so I just think, yes, he had help, but to be as impactful as he was at his peak and to be such a clear positive for so long, it has to put him somewhere in this top 7 range, because he showed you what he could be as a monster floor raiser from 01 to 03. He showed you that he could be the dominant defender, the strong playoff scorer, the good passer, a legit offensive number one. And then he also showed you that in the late 2000s and the early 2010s, he could still be a good supporting offensive player and still an elite high impact defender and just somebody who was going to make you better on both sides of the ball as a basketball team. So it's so many years of strong impact, a career plus 8 on offswing, and a plus 10 on-court net rating. I believe he has the highest plus minus in NBA history, which is just the perfect Tim Duncan stat. So leading contenders for as long as he did in roles that changed over the years, but always essential to those teams' success. I do think compared to Steph, he just gives me even more strong seasons. His longevity is so remarkable. And I also think he peaked a tad higher because his defense was so monstrous, and then he could take on that offensive load as well, as we saw in 03. I'm a little bit higher on Shaq just because I think the peak with Shaq is so dominant. I think it's even in a different class from Duncan's peak, but I definitely think there's an argument for Duncan above Shaq because of the longevity, the 19 quality years.
Yeah, I mean, that's really the difference to me is just even throughout the different iterations of Duncan, I know I'm just getting a winner and a guy who he's a rock. He is the bedrock of the Spurs, right? Like, it can just consistent winning impact even after his athletic prime. He's got the 6th highest winning percentage of any player in NBA history with 15 plus points per game. I think it's like minimum 500 games played. The only guys above him are some of the legends of the sport.
Can I guess?
Magic,
Kawhi, Bird. Are they all on there?
I don't think Kawhi is above him.
Really? He's fallen off.
Bird,
he used to be
Bird and Magic, I believe. I don't have the list in front of me. There's one more name that I do remember that was above him, but it's kind of obvious.
Is it Manu or Tony Parker?
No, it's just one of the 60s Celtics with with Bill Russell. I think it's like Tommy Heinsohn or something like that. So but Duncan is the first Spur, and obviously the elite defense, the elite rebounding, it's what you immediately think of with Duncan. But I actually find Duncan to be a very aesthetically pleasing basketball player to watch offensively too. Like, I enjoy going back and watching prime Tim Duncan for one reason only. It's the efficiency of the movement. I love that there's not any waste. There's no excess. There's nothing extra with Duncan. There's a method to every movement on the court, man. Like, he is just so crafty and so technically sound. Yes, it's the footwork. Yes, it's the ball fakes. It's the shooting touch too, with the post hooks, the post fades, the little flip shots, but he is always so quick, so decisive, and so efficient in all of his movements. Like, it's always, I get the ball, left elbow, right elbow, boom, pump fake, jab step, I'm by you to the rim, 2-3 dribbles, easy layup. It's ball fake left, spin right, jump shot, post fade. Like, it's so easy and so effective. It's not, I'm going to dribble the ball, the air out of the ball, and try to fire a cross-court pass. No, it's not going to be the most, wow, what a play, but it is going to be some of the most effective, and it's like he could score through double teams. He could kick to an open guy off of a double team, because this is what defenses are having to do. It's not like the Shaq kind of defensive attention that he's getting, but you got to think, too, this is an era where Tim Duncan is playing the power forward position at 6'11", 7 foot, and he's having a lot of easy mismatches baked in because he's going up against a lot of power forwards that are 6'8", that are 6'9", and he's strong. Like, he was a mismatch in that era and just so physically imposing and had that combination of strength and agility at his peak. And then in his later years, it's less agility, it's more craft and strength, but always really, really effective. And like I said, it's not the sexiest offensive game. It is not the most effective offensive game where he is, elevating his teammates like these all-time offensive engines, but is always really effective. It is always really efficient. And it's a winning skill set. And he does it for damn near 20 years.
Yeah.
If I'm getting Tim Duncan from the outset, I just couldn't leave him outside of my top 10, man. I am just getting a guy that is going to be great for my basketball team and a winner for damn near 2 decades. I can't pass that up. I love Tim Duncan, man. I know you love Tim Duncan, too. We just hold him in such high regard. I really do, though, man. Like, I go back, man, put on the clips. Like, it's art to me, man. It is beautiful watching him work. Speaking from a guy who I'm not physically imposing on the court. I can see like a guy with limitations still finding a way to be effective. It's endearing, and I find it really beautiful to watch with Duncan, man. He's an artist in the post, and he's just awesome. I do think he is underrated offensively.
I agree. I do think that what he did to buoy those playoff offenses, especially from 2001 to 07 in the playoffs, Logan, their offenses were 10 points better in terms of offensive rating with him on the court compared to off it. And I come back to this Duncan on, Tony Parker off. When Duncan was on without Parker, they were still a plus offense. They were a +8 net team. When Parker played without Duncan, they were a -2.4 net team. So I don't know that he gets enough credit for that. Again, he was not going to be the centerpiece of elite offenses, but he showed you in the early 2000s he could take on a big offensive load and you were still going to be a very good offense, and he was going to make you a dominant defense. So I think there's a good case for him in the top 5. Again, it's just Shaq's peak I put in a different class even from Duncan. But we've got the same names in our top 4, Logan, unless you do have Jeff Hornacek, which we'll just have to see. Who is in your 4 spot, Logan?
Well, I did reveal that Nas Reed while
I'm sorry, that's what it was.
Spots here, so
okay, I forgot about that. Well, luckily I have them both here as well, so we do have the same top 4.
I have Bill Russell here in my 4 spot, and I have nothing negative at all to say about Bill Russell. We are premier Bill Russell Glazers here. I think Bill Russell has a sort of impenetrable GOAT case. It is infallible. Like, if you wanted to make the Bill Russell is my number 1, he is my GOAT because of how translatable and how winning his skill set is. If you wanted to put him in the 1 spot, I would go, okay, that makes sense to me. Like,
our buddy Mars has done it many a time.
I would not push back whatsoever. I think it is very strong, the fact that he was the greatest defender in NBA history, the most impactful defender in NBA history, the fact that those Celtics offenses of the 60s were so mediocre, and yet the gap between them as offenses wherever they ranked in the league, and defenses, like they were just literally head and shoulders above other teams in terms of defense, and how Russell's defensive impact led to them being decent offenses. And the fact that, Bill, without having this, gaudy scoring impact of the Wilts of this era, of the Oscar Robertsons of this era, the fact that he was able to be this effective defensively, it's incredible, man. I mean, we're talking about bedrock with Tim Duncan. Bill Russell is the bedrock of these Celtics, and the only reason that he isn't higher is I do think the three guys above him peaked higher. I think they have better two-way cases, but again, it's kind of reductive, in my opinion, to distill Bill Russell down to that and go, the two-way stuff. We're like, yeah. Bill was a solid offensive player, and in that era, again, his skill set was just that much more valuable because he's the greatest defender ever, and that rim protection was the most valuable thing that you could have, and the rebounding was so valuable in this era of basketball that I think it's kind of stupid to even kind of really hold that against Bill all that much, to have him any lower than this, in my opinion. I couldn't have him any lower than this. He is the greatest winner in NBA history. He is the greatest defender in NBA history, and he was impactful from the day that he walked into the league to the day that he walked out. So, yeah. If you wanted to have Bill anywhere in this top four, I wouldn't argue against it. Personally, I don't think you can go any lower than this with Bill Russell. I think he has to be in the top four. Bill is the fucking man. Rest in power, Bill.
If your criteria is what my criteria is, which is valuing impact relative to era, there is no argument for Bill Russell lower than 4, I don't think, because to fully appreciate his impact, you just have to detach yourself from a modern basketball way of thinking. And I'm about to do my Bill Russell spiel, and if you've heard it before, then I apologize. We have to do it again because maybe some people haven't heard it before, and if you haven't, then welcome to
Kick
the
back,
show.
Get your popcorn ready.
I'm going to try to keep it tight, but again, what you have to understand is that Bill Russell was able to impact the game in a way that surpassed anybody else in his era, in a way that is so dramatically different from all of the best players in today's NBA that if you do try to retroactively apply some modern criteria to him, you're not going to understand, you're not going to appreciate how dominant he was in his time. But if you just analyze the facts of his impact in his era, that the Celtics had the greatest 13-year run in NBA history. They won 11 titles in 13 years with Bill Russell. And that unparalleled run of success was fueled overwhelmingly by one side of the ball. They had the NBA's best defense 12 times. On average, they were 4.2 points better in terms of defensive rating than the next best defense in the NBA. 1964 is the greatest relative defense in NBA history. 1965 is the second greatest relative defense in NBA history. Every single year, they are lapping the field defensively. And that is the reason that they are winning the title pretty much every year. 3 times they had the NBA's worst offense, and each of those times they still ranked number 1 in net rating, and they still won the NBA title because they were by so far the greatest defenses in NBA history. And the reason the Celtics were by so far the greatest defenses in NBA history was overwhelmingly because of one player, and that is Bill Russell. They sucked on defense before he got there. And as a rookie, he improved their defensive rating by 8 points. He took them from a bad defense to the number 1 defense in the NBA, and that's why they won the championship. After he retired, their defensive rating plummeted by 10 points from number 1 in the NBA in his final season to below average after he left. And that was the difference between them being a champion still in his final season and a well below average 34-win team after he left. Bill Russell was the formula to the greatest run of team success we have ever seen. As long as Russell was there, the Celtics dominated after Kuzi and after Heinsohn and after Ramsey and after Sharman. They dominated when Russell was there. Before Hondo came in, he was the dynasty. He really was. People will try to point and say, oh, he played with all these other really good players. Those guys are all elevated by playing with Bill Russell. Their statures are elevated by the fact that, yeah, they won all these championships, but guess who was winning championships with or without them? Bill Russell, because he was the key to everything. And the reason that one player could be so overwhelmingly impactful defensively at this time in a way that hasn't been possible since is just because of fundamental changes in the game, because of the fact that now we have a three-point line and offenses are way more skilled. And so a singular rim protector can still be very valuable, but cannot shut down NBA offenses in the way that a Bill Russell could when everybody's objective was to score at the basket. And you had a guy who had perfect timing, who was so agile, who was so quick, who was ridiculously bouncy, who was blocking 8 to 10 shots a game and deterring so many more because he was this true freak athlete. And he was also one of the smartest defensive players we've ever seen, the greatest defensive intimidator in NBA history, the greatest defensive rebounder in NBA history, who also, by the way, on top of this truly unparalleled rim protection value, could actually get out and defend on the perimeter because he was long, he was agile, he had really good hands. He was also a great post defender who really impacted his greatest rival, Wilt Chamberlain, always produced well below his average in terms of volume and efficiency against Bill Russell. And this is why Bill Russell is the dominant player of this era. And this is why his teams were always the best. It's because he, on the defensive end, was able to impact the game in a way that no other player on either individual side of the ball has ever come close to since. There is no offensive player whose offense is as impactful as Bill Russell's defense. And there is no other defensive player whose defense is as impactful as his. And again, I've said all these things so many times before, but I just think everybody has to understand that if you are judging relative to era, Bill Russell is absolutely the greatest player of the 60s, and he is a top 4 player of all time. And again, there's an argument for him to be even higher than this. It does have to be said that 11 titles in an 8 to 14 team league is not equivalent to 11 titles today, and people will throw that out there at Bill a lot, but still, nobody was beating Bill Russell's Celtics. And again, that's even with changes in personnel around him. So it's like, yeah, okay, I'm not saying that it's like, oh, somebody else has to win 11 titles today to be as great a winner as Bill Russell's Celtics, but just think about that. For 13 years, nobody is beating you. If this guy is on your team, that's it, man. That's the whole thing right there. That's what we're judging here. Who impacted their team's ability to win the most? Bill Russell has to be at the very top of that list. They won 72% of the games that he played. They won just about 50% of the games without him. And so I just think the impact resume is undeniable here at every possible step of the way. He proved how insanely valuable he was. And so I do think there's a cheeky GOAT case for Bill Russell, but I do think it's cheeky. And the reasons are: longevity is a separator for two of the guys above him. They just have absolutely insane longevity. And the other guy had the greatest peak ever, in my opinion. And overall, the two-way level those guys all reached is so absurd. And like you're saying, I think saying, oh, those guys had higher two-way peaks can be a cop-out, because it's like Bill Russell's one-way value was more valuable than any one side of the ball we've ever seen from anybody. And also, Bill Russell did have offensive value, right? He was valuable in terms of his playmaking. He was valuable in terms of getting the fast break started out in transition. He was a solid scorer, like a respectable scorer. So I don't want to downplay that. Like, he was solid offensively, but it really is all about the defense. I just think the top 3 is extremely tough to crack. And honestly, I just take it LeBron and MJ over anybody. Like, I just think they're so clearly the two greatest basketball players ever. Maybe I shouldn't put it that absolutely, because again, there is a case for Russell just relative to his era, but I'm always going to go with those two above everybody else. And then Kareem, his longevity is just so absurd. So the top 3, I don't think we're going to be making any headlines here.
I don't think we will either. I have Kareem in my third spot. Do you as well?
I do as well.
Yeah, Kareem is fascinating to me. One, because of the longevity, like you said, you're getting a top 5 to top 10 player for basically the entire length of his career, and until the very tail end when he's really really old. But the different iterations of Kareem are the most fascinating to me, where you have this metamorphosis as a player where originally he comes in and he is one of the best players on the planet immediately out of college. He is the most athletically imposing player in the sport offensively, head and shoulders above people athletically, but the best rim protector and I think one of the best defenders on the planet immediately. And he plays alongside an all-time playmaker, is still the best player on the team when they get Oscar Robertson in, and he wins a championship very early on with Milwaukee. Later on, when he goes to the Lakers, I think he is the best offensive player and the best scorer on the planet, where he is completely polished. He is unstoppable. The playoff scoring translates so easily for him, but he doesn't have the team success. He wins some accolades, gets some MVPs, and then later on, still very impactful offensively and super polished. Probably not the absolute peak of his powers, but is still a top 5 to 10 player on the planet. And Magic comes into the fold, and they just run the 80s again alongside Boston. I do think when we talk about the supporting cast, it is important to note again how great those 80s Lakers teams were, that the ring case is not the be-all, end-all to me. The MVP case with Kareem is not the be-all, end-all to me. The accolades are crazy. They're staggering to look at, but it's not the be-all, end-all with Kareem. I don't say that Kareem is my GOAT because he's got X MVPs and X rings. No, I think it's important to recognize that those 80s Lakers teams were loaded, and he did have an Oscar Robertson to help him early on when he won the title in Milwaukee, right? I think that context is very important. But I do just think that both LeBron and MJ, that's one of the tough things about Kareem's peak, is it's like I think Kareem has different peaks that you could argue for him offensively, two-way, purely defensively, where I think that LeBron and MJ's peaks coincide. Their two-way peaks a little bit better. I think they're a little bit better defined. Kareem probably has better longevity than MJ. MJ's got pretty good longevity. I think Kareem's got better longevity.
For sure.
LeBron, to me, just has the impenetrable GOAT case that is LeBron. Old heads can poke back and get mad at that, but it's fucking LeBron, man. And so those are the slight differences that I would be distinctive with about Kareem, where I think MJ doesn't have the edge in longevity, but does have the edge in peak. And then I just think LeBron just takes the cake in both regards. But like you said, I don't think we're covering any new ground here. These have been the top 3 to me. And the only difference that I have from, I think, the last time that we did this is my 1 and 2, or maybe I had the same 1 and 2 last time we did this. I don't remember, but the top 3 names are still the same.
Yeah, and I really think the top 4 are a tier. Like, I think there's a legit argument for Russell above Kareem, and what I think all 4 of these guys share in common as just the simplest testament to their dominance is they all have like a decade where they're the best in the world, more or less. And for Kareem, I think that starts when he comes into the NBA. I think as a rookie, he was already the best player in the league. And through 1981, I would say he's still the best in the league. So just an absurd two-way force in the early years, an absurd offensive force for a long time. And you did see his impact immediately. Like, as a rookie, he joined a 27-win team that had literally just joined the league in expansion. Like, the Bucks' first year in existence was the year before Kareem joined. And he takes that fucking scrap parts team and he makes them a 56-win team immediately. He improves their offensive rating by over 8 points as a rookie. I already think he should have won MVP that season over Willis Reed. And then he did average 35 and 17 in the playoffs that year very efficiently. So doubled his team's win total. Crazy playoff performance. I think he was already the best player in the world. And then the next year, he gets Oscar, and now he carries one of the greatest teams ever that is the best offense and defense in the NBA. And yes, Oscar helped unlock another level with that team, but also from 71 to 74, Kareem went 29 and 10 in games without Oscar. And he led 4 straight top 2 defenses, 4 straight teams that were top 2 by net rating. They averaged 62 wins per season, and they weren't loaded teams because Oscar was already past his prime in 71, and he was a good offensive player throughout, but just continued to diminish by a little bit. And Bobby Dandridge is a two-way forward
John
who I like a lot.
Disrespect, dude.
John McLaughlin could shoot that shit, man, and I will never disrespect him. But for them being the sort of like all-time juggernaut that they were, a lot of the credit for that goes to Kareem. And I do think even though his offense wasn't as polished in 71 and 72 as it would later become, the fact that he was just so athletic and so dominant defensively at that time, whereas his defense would tail off a bit in the later 70s, I think that's probably when he peaked. But you could also go with the later 70s years with the Lakers because Kareem was just insane for the entire decade. 1975, the Bucks missed the playoffs. That gets held a lot against Kareem, that, oh, at your peak, your team missed the playoffs. I always think we have to bring up that they were 35-30 when Kareem played that year, and they were 3-14 without him. So the guy led dominant teams for 5 straight years, and then one year, yeah, his team misses the playoffs, but they're actually still pretty good when he plays. They're just the worst team in the league when he doesn't. He might even get bonus points for that, in my opinion. But then in 76, the Lakers missed the playoffs and Kareem does play the full season. They go 40-42, and it wasn't a very talented team. They had only won 30 games the year before. The only thing I think this really shows you is that Kareem wasn't MJ and he wasn't LeBron when it comes to that peak and that level of floor raising, where it's like those guys truly, you put the 2009 Cavs around LeBron and he gets you to win 66 games. Like there's just a level of those two in their peak being in a different class. Kareem wasn't there, but again, the team around him just wasn't good. And so the only knock is that he's not the top two, really. 77-79, he does get the Lakers to be a solid playoff team and some pretty good offenses. And then they add Magic in 1980 and they take off. And from 80 to 89, pretty much all they do is dominate. Again, there's sort of this like mutual tax, I guess, with him and Magic, where it's like he played with him and he played with him and they both rocked. And so, yeah, it has to be considered. I do think by 82, Magic is arguably their best player. By like 84, I think Magic just is their best player. And so Kareem was getting a lot of help. And by the very end of his career, he was getting carried and he was just kind of a supporting piece. But that's after he had already given you 17 years of stardom and a dozen years as the best player in the world. So I think he had already done plenty by that time. Just a monster score, like over his entire career, gives you basically 25 points per game on better than plus 7% relative true shooting, which is just unbelievable. The size and grace and skill combination that he had, the agility and the touch for being like a true giant was just so freakish. And he was a legitimately good passing big. So Kareem is just a monster. I mean, he's got a phenomenal case. One of the greatest scorers we've ever seen, incredibly efficient as a scorer, elite rebounder, underrated passer, again, a dominant defender in his early years, and still a good defender throughout his prime just because the rim protection and the rebounding was valuable, even though he was inconsistent in terms of effort and whatnot. Really, I do think his only sin, to come back to it, is that he wasn't MJ or LeBron, that he wasn't that level of a one-man offensive force. Like, his elite team offenses did pretty much come when he had an elite playmaker. He led good offenses without Oscar or Magic, but never a great one. And I don't think that he was like a Shaq level of offensive force at his peak. Now, I think that he has the longevity edge over Shaq, so that's why he's higher on this list. But he was not, again, an automatic elite team throughout his entire prime. And he was not as dominant a playoff performer as MJ, whose playoff resume is really flawless, or LeBron with the totality of what he did, some of the all-time great runs that he stacked up. So that's just it. Like, Kareem is here because the peak is so great and the longevity is so great, but I don't think he has the third highest peak in NBA history, as we've talked about. I think if you're just going with the best 3 seasons that you got from a guy, he is below Shaq. I think he's slightly below Hakeem for me. I think Wilt's 1967 is a better individual season than Kareem had. I think Russell is in that same range. So I just don't think the peak is quite high enough to crack the ridiculously high bar that is set with the top 2. I have talked a lot about longevity throughout this list, though, and how when I think about the total championship value that you add to me, obviously the number of quality, really good seasons you give me matters a lot. And so there's an argument that would put Kareem over MJ, but I still don't think it does, because I think MJ was so preposterously good, so unbelievably good at his best, that like the difference in championship probability that he's adding in 91 and 92 and 93 compared to even like a Kareem at his best, like I really couldn't conceive of an MJ team missing the playoffs when he's at his best. I mean, in fact, they were winning the title every year when he was at his best and had the team around him. And so there's just such a ridiculously high peak there that he has to be in the top 2 for me still.
I agree. I mean, I think MJ peaked higher than anybody else. I think his,
I agree.
91 NBA finals, if we were able to, single out a year. And I just think that run, 91 to 93, it is untouchable to me. And it's really LeBron's longevity that has done it for me at this point. They're so similar in terms of their peak. I think these are the two players that have peaked higher than anybody else in NBA history. And the thing, too, is, MJ, they hold it against MJ, the fact that, he missed the playoffs, or he was getting bounced in the first round, early on with some lackluster Bulls teams, and he didn't really win until Scottie came along. But it also coincided with the change in philosophy for the Bulls and a change in Jordan's play style. He was a volume scorer, the best scorer in basketball for a while, and then they changed their offensive system. They moved towards the triangle, and it just, it also coincides with, MJ getting bounced and having to go through the trials and tribulations of the Eastern Conference and running into the bad boys Pistons, and he gets stronger. And when he figures it out, I just think it's undeniable, man, that when you get him at his best, I'm going to win. I'm going to win. I'm going to win 5+ rings, man, in a decade. And who knows? I always do find it really interesting. Like, what if MJ did hang on for those 2 years? Do they win 2 more titles? Do they go 8-0? Does he lose and he loses that mystique? Does Hakeem just show that he's undeniable? I do think it kind of adds to Jordan's mystique. I think it isn't that it's untouchable, that run, man. 3-0 in the first three-peat, 3-0 in the second three-peat. I just wish he hadn't fucking come back with the Wizards, man. It would have made it so much better. It was a fairy tale ending.
Yeah.
I think that really when we're looking at the difference between him and LeBron, again, I do think MJ peaked higher. I think that LeBron's peak is so close to his. And for a while, I was Team MJ. I was always going to bat for MJ. To me, LeBron has been doing it for so long that I just can't deny LeBron any longer. I think that you have to do more mental gymnastics to argue that LeBron isn't the GOAT than he is the GOAT, and that's the difference to me. And I think that the arguments that people will have to make against LeBron are just too flawed. Old people... And I know my dad's going to be mad at this. It's mostly old people that go to this. I think about my dad making the MJ case, and I know he's going to be mad that I have LeBron above MJ, because MJ is his GOAT.
Can we just get a fuck old people out of you real quick, Logan?
I can't. I love old people. I respect my elders, but...
you do have a thing for old people, don't you? We've talked about this
like Scaraman! Yeah.
You like a mature individual.
I love Josh Jefferson, man. What can I say?
But...
my dad and other old heads that would argue that MJ is the GOAT would immediately point to the 2011 NBA Finals, and I do think it is damning, and I think it is the low point of any all-time great for letting their team down on a very big stage. I've never seen anything quite like it from a superstar. That being said, it's one playoff series, and when you look at any all-time great, they are going to have a down moment that you can point to. Is it lower than some other all-time greats? Certainly. I think it's an all-time low point for an all-time great. That being said, does one bad playoff series from a legend override over 20 years of greatness, 20 years of being a top 5 player on the planet, another 10 to 15 of being the best on the planet? No, it doesn't. LeBron is undeniable. Again, to reiterate my fundamental point, I think you have to do more mental gymnastics to argue that LeBron isn't the all-time GOAT. His longevity is absurd. What he was doing a year ago, insane what he was doing
Yeah.
this season. He won a playoff series as the best player on a team without his two best co-stars in his 40s. I mean, what the fuck, man? Like,
Yeah.
he's the GOAT. I couldn't have anybody above LeBron, and I think it is going to take somebody reaching a stupidly absurd peak and doing it for 18 to 20 years to surpass
Yeah.
LeBron. Like,
Yeah.
he's the GOAT, man.
The bar for Wemby is so high, but I do think that most of the anti-LeBron arguments at this point pretty much suck. Took me a long time to come over to the LeBron GOAT side just because I'm so high on MJ's peak. It wasn't until 2024. Now, I do think my criteria has changed, and with the way that I am doing this list, I would have had LeBron as the GOAT sooner because I am really thinking about who gives me the best chance to win the most championships if they're on my team. And the answer for that is just clearly LeBron James. And you can try to isolate an individual moment, but that just doesn't tell the story of a basketball career. That doesn't tell the story of a player's impact overall. And like you said, I mean, LeBron gets reamed for 2011, and rightfully so, but how many other all-time great playoff performances and finals performances has he put together? Like, how about 2012 and 2013 and 2015 and 2016 and 2017 and 2018 and 2020?
That LeBron lost, right, to those legendary Warriors teams that I think the greatest team ever assembled. And it's like people don't respect those series and those performances enough against those all-time great teams when it's like...
But who are people? Like, I think there's still a contingent of LeBron haters.
People
but don't
that
we
hate
mostly
the GOAT.
laugh at that at this point? Aren't we mostly like, yeah...
I think it's foolish.
Those
I think
arguments
it's buffoonery.
suck. But I think that's the consensus. Maybe I'm being too Gen Z here, and maybe there is still more people who are anti-LeBron and think Jordan is the GOAT. And again, I do think that Jordan has the highest peak, but there's just no way with my criteria that I could argue anybody else when you were talking about a guy who at 4 different points, 4 different versions of LeBron have an argument for having the highest peak ever. And again, I would say that MJ peaked higher, but LeBron very clearly has the second highest peak ever, and he's given you 23 star level seasons, 21 all NBA seasons, at least a dozen seasons as the best player in the world. It has to be LeBron. But I do want to spend a moment on MJ first before we circle back to Bron, because I do think his utter dominance at his best was still the greatest of any player that we've ever seen. And in terms of playoff performance, like, again, I talk about how many moments you can point to from all-time great players if you wanted to really scrutinize them. You could say, oh, Magic had the worst clutch series ever in the 84 finals. You could say, oh, Kareem kind of sucked in back-to-back playoffs in 72 and 73. You could say, oh, Bird in the 81 finals, yeah, his team won, but he scored 8 points in 2 different games. You could point to the 2016 finals with Steph, right? Like, there are a lot of players who have a bad playoff series on their resume. It is pretty remarkable how spotless Jordan's playoff resume is, though. And he did lose in 1995. That did happen, okay? The Bulls did not just win 6 straight titles. They won 3 titles, and then Jordan didn't play basketball for a year. Then he came back, they lost, and then they won 3 more titles. Like, that's obvious, but I feel like it always needs to be said because some people will just go, oh, Jordan won 6 straight titles. And it's like, well, that's not actually what happened. But when he was on the court, I mean, 88 to 93 especially, in the playoffs, the guy gave you 35, 7-7 on plus 5% relative true shooting. I think the fakest debate in NBA history is the GOAT scorer debate because there is none. Kevin Durant could take all his cute-ass versatility and get the fuck out of here because nobody comes close to Michael Jordan as a scorer. That sort of volume, that sort of efficiency, one of the very greatest athletes in the history of this game when you're talking about a guy who had maybe the quickest first step relative to the dudes around him that we've ever seen, the greatest rim finishing guard we've ever seen, who had a ridiculous bounce, who had ridiculous body control, who had a ridiculous ability to elevate and adjust as a finisher, and was so fucking skilled around the basket, incredible touch, and he was so twitchy and he was so quick, and he was just such a monster scorer downhill at his peak. And then he's also one of the very greatest mid-range shooters in the history of the game, and at such massive volume, could hit like 50% of those shots. I mean, when we have the data, it's remarkable, the volume and efficiency that he's giving you from the mid-range. Lethal on-ball scorer, incredible off-ball scorer, dynamic cutter, elite catch and shooter from the mid-range, just destroyed closeouts. Like, it's an insane combination of tier 1 all-time athleticism with tier 1 all-time skill, on ball, off ball, out of the post, absolute master, the footwork, the elevation, the shot making, and isolation, unstoppable. The hang time with MJ, I mean, both around the basket and from the mid-range, his ability to just elevate above people and adjust in midair, so remarkable. And so you put that scoring skill set together, and you have the greatest scorer ever by far, who carved up literally any defense in the playoffs for this entire time. People talk about, 89 and 90, like he had to learn his lessons against the bad boy Pistons. If you actually go back and rewatch those series, he was carving them up. He was getting beat up, but he was frying them. His teammates just fucking sucked, and he still got them really close. He gets them to Game 7 against Detroit in 1990, and I believe his teammates shot 23% combined in that game. He still gave you like an efficient 31, 8, and 9. It's just the team around him wasn't ready. MJ was already, by 1988, clearly the best player in the world. I do think there were some subtle improvements that he made, where his absolute peak to me starts in 91, and adding strength mattered a bit. And I think really maximizing his off-ball value and cutting down on turnovers made him like the best possible version of himself. But he was a dominant force for that entire time. And 1991 MJ, I do think, is the greatest player ever. He's the GOAT scorer by a mile, who is an elite off-ball threat. And so there's a versatility to his offensive attack. He's a strong passer and an elite playmaker when you talk about the value of the attention that he's drawing, enhancing his teammate's shot quality. Another guy who, I mean, he showed you that he could pick you apart as a playmaker, as a passer. The 91 finals are a great example of that, but his offensive impact was so monstrous, even if he didn't necessarily have monster assist numbers all the time, because the scoring value was so beyond comparison. He was also an elite turnover suppressor. He was an elite offensive rebounder. Like, I just think MJ's the easiest player ever to build an all-time great offense around, because that sort of scoring volume, with that versatility, with that efficiency, with that value in the possession game, knowing more so than any other player ever that he's going to consistently give you that in a postseason environment, like, that's the starting point that I would want. I did rank him as having the highest offensive peak ever when we did that episode, and he led 4 of the top 25 relative offenses in NBA history, which is very noteworthy. Steve Nash is the only other guy with 3+, and MJ is just the GOAT playoff performer at his peak, and I already read off the numbers, and we know what the resume is. And I think overall, he's the greatest ceiling raiser in NBA history. I think if you're saying, give me somebody who can take a team from solid to elite, I want MJ's crazy lean, but also crazy volume scoring and that playmaking value. I want his plus defense, where some people overrate him, but he's still a stock machine, a uniquely great rim protecting guard, a really good rebounder, a monster at forcing steals, who was a really good on-ball defender overall. Like, he was a high-level defender. Absolutely, they needed Pippen to unlock the dynasty, but even from 88 to 98, when MJ played without Scottie Pippen, the Bulls won 67% of their games. So the resume is obvious. It speaks for itself. I will say, these are some cool numbers. This is according to B-Ball History Database. Shout out to this guy. This is a fellow who's going back through history before play-by-play data started and hand tracking a lot of like on-off stuff and play-by-play stuff for some of these all-time great players. And MJ is the guy who he's gotten the furthest with, who he's tracked the most of his games. So take these numbers with a grain of salt. I didn't compile these numbers. These are not official numbers. However, according to B-Ball History Database, in the Bulls years, MJ had a +16 on-off swing and a +14 offensive on-off swing, which would paint him as being, in terms of at his peak, the GOAT in terms of offensive impact, the GOAT in terms of impact, and I do think that's what his peak was. And same site says that from 1990 to 98, when Jordan and Pippen were on together, the Bulls were a +14 net team. When Jordan was on without Pippen, they were still better than a +7 net team. When Pippen was on without Jordan, they were a slightly negative net team, -1.2. So all of this points to greatest impact ever at his peak, but he just didn't do it for nearly as long as LeBron. I mean, there's really no way to compare 11 healthy seasons in Chicago against 23 seasons of LeBron and say that's going to surpass it. To me, the more interesting debate at this point is whose peak do you prefer? I take MJ. I still think there's a good argument for LeBron, but totality, it has to be Bron.
It really does. I mean, the athletic imposition, what he was in his athletic prime, a freak of nature, how his athleticism has transformed throughout the years, right? The explosiveness and verticality and speed when LeBron is young to now this old man strength and in post game that he has in his older age, all while being a really brilliant playmaker and then becoming an elite jump shooter in Miami and later in his career sustaining that jump shooting into his 40s. Like, there's really no comparison. I don't have anybody else that you can look at in NBA history that has done what LeBron has done, and that's why he's number one, is that when you're getting young LeBron, you were getting the best athlete in basketball and one of the greatest floor raisers ever. When you were getting peak and prime LeBron, I'd say in Miami with the Heatles, you were getting this elite blend of athleticism, playmaking, scoring, and jump shooting, an unstoppable and inevitable force. In Cleveland, you were getting the offensive maestro, the puppet master of the NBA that is dictating and controlling every single possession down the floor, setting his teammates up for easy open looks while also getting downhill at an obscene rate and creating such easy offense at the rim. Into the Lakers years where he is still dictating and controlling the game. And then, when he wins a title with AD, still is the lead guy or second fiddle. There's an argument for AD there. I've said AD in the past. I'd probably still go LeBron. But and even on into these later Lakers years, which are, again, I've said for a lot of these guys, it is icing on the cake, but it's not icing. It's like LeBron made me another cake and was just like, no, you can go ahead and eat this one too. Like, some of these guys, it's icing. LeBron, there's still a ton of substance here, even though he's picking his spots, right? Because the knock even on him in these later years is LeBron can't do it every single night. Bruh, there's nobody else even playing that you look at. They're all retired. Or even if they're still on the court, they're giving you 5 points per game off the bench, playing 10 minutes a night. Like, LeBron is still playing, still starting, and still has an immense amount of impact when he is on the floor. A mismatch attacker in the post who can pick apart defenses with his mind. I love this stat because it's so staggering. Last year, not this year, last season, the only player in NBA history to ever shoot 70% at the rim and over 40% from behind the arc. That's old-ass LeBron James doing that. He's the only player ever to do that. Like, whatever version it was, great winning impact in these different versions of LeBron. There's nobody else that has a resume quite like the King, man.
No. Yeah, it really is incredible. And I think we see this with like all the greats where they undergo some amount of evolution, right? We saw it with MJ for sure in terms of becoming more predicated upon the post-up game and the mid-range, as his athleticism wasn't quite the same in the second three-peat as it was in his peak years, but he was still the best scorer and the best player in the world. But what LeBron has done is its own thing. Like, just every step of the way, tweaking, adjusting, improving upon this, adapting in this way. It is remarkable. And I come back to the idea that there's 4 different versions of him who you could argue are the greatest player ever, and we see people do it. 2009 and 2010, I think, is the greatest two-way floor-raising job that we've ever seen, where he takes this team that is very much lacking offensive talent around him, and he carries them to be elite offenses, while he's also one of the best defenders on the planet, and he's winning 66 games and 61 games without a real star alongside him, and has a plus 19 on off swing over those 2 seasons. Like, that LeBron, when it comes to the ability to just carry a team through a regular season, is the best we've ever seen at that. And then 2012 and 2013, I've said I think that MJ is the GOAT ceiling raiser, but that's the version of LeBron that makes a case because that's when he peaked as a play finisher. That's when, as you mentioned, I mean, he had a very strong three-point shooting season in 2013. That's when he was at his best defensively. It's when he was his most effective as an off-ball scorer and in transition, and he's still a massive monster on ball as a playmaker, but he also mastered all of the complementary skills that he could have. And so that's maybe the most complete version of LeBron that we've ever seen and the best fit to just drop him onto a talented team and he is going to take you up to this level of absolute dominance. Then you have 2016 LeBron, who is not quite the offensive player that he would be the next 2 years, but is an absolute offensive genius. And as you say, at this point, just such a pick and roll on ball maestro while he was still giving you plus defense, like very good defense in that playoff run, and plays maybe the greatest 3-game stretch we've ever seen to come back from down 3-1 in the finals. And then you have 2017 and 2018 LeBron, at which point he's just like, all right, do you mind if I walk into the playoffs and I average like a cool 33, 8, and 9 on ridiculous efficiency and carry these offenses? And now maybe I'm the greatest offensive floor raiser ever because you put the ball in my hands and I'm just going to absolutely pick you apart and I'm unstoppable as a scorer and I'm one of the greatest passers that we've ever seen. And then you have the Lakers years where in 2020, I do still think he was the best player in the world. And again, it took until 2024 for me to say that LeBron was the GOAT. And I think some people are like, why is it the later years that move you? It's really just about the totality of it. It's about the fact that, for the love of God, I mean, the guy's 41 years old. He was still the best player in a playoff series that his team won this year. Now, that was against the disgusting Houston Rockets, but like nobody has ever played in a 23rd season before. That's what he's still doing in his 23rd season. In his 22nd season, he's still making a case for being a top 10 player on the planet. Like, you stack this all up, and then you think about how strong the peak is. And the fact that, I mean, worst case scenario, it's like 98% of MJ's peak and is a top 2 peak in NBA history. And it has to be Bron. I do think all of the arguments that are used against him at this point, generally speaking, are pretty gimmicky. If you're a peak purist, okay, I don't really think that makes sense when you're talking about a career evaluation. But like mostly people will just try to be like, oh, he's not clutch. And then it's like, well, I mean, in the play-by-play area, he's got by far the most clutch shots made in the playoffs by any measure. Go-ahead shots in the last 30 seconds, go-ahead shots in the last 2 minutes. I mean, he's got the most playoff game-winning buzzer beaters. His efficiency on clutch shots is very good. And yeah, he has so many incredible clutch moments that we can point to, like, again, back against the wall against the greatest regular season team ever, playing the greatest 3 games consecutively that we've ever seen. You know, I would say that moves me. I would say what he did to close out the 2013 finals, that's pretty fucking clutch. People will try to say, oh, we got bailed out by Ray Allen. It's like, well, he had 16 points in that fourth quarter. He played a great game in Game 7. He made multiple clutch plays to ice that Game 7. Like, the totality of what he has done, regular season and playoffs both, it just makes him the GOAT. It's incredible. I mean, over 23 years, Logan, this guy has sustained a plus 10 on off swing. To be that consistently impactful for that long, you can look at every stop, and you know what? Why don't we do it? The first stint in Cleveland, they won 62% of their games with him, 38% without him. Then in Miami, they won 73% of their games with him, 50% without him. Then the second Cleveland stint, they win 69% of their games with him. They go 4-23 without him. That's a 15% win rate. And then the Lakers stint, they win 60% of their games with him, just 45% without. So overall, we combine all those. His teams have won 65% of the games that he's played and just under 41% of the games that he hasn't. Just another feather in his cap, that sort of impact year after year, spot after spot. LeBron James is the one and only GOAT.
Yeah, I mean, I think until further notice, I'm just kind of sitting here wondering, like, we know who, is the table is set for, but it's going to take such immense success, man. I think as we get further and further removed, like, I still think there are people that don't fully appreciate LeBron because he's still playing, man. It's not normal. When I started watching basketball, this guy was playing. And not only was he playing, he was 8 years deep, and he's still doing it. I went to I started school and graduated high school, and then I graduated college, and all throughout that time, this guy was playing basketball and was arguably the best player on the planet.
And
I've been removed now.
You're about to turn 25, and he's still going to be playing.
I graduated college 3 years ago, and he's still doing it.
Yeah.
And he's going to do it again this year. Like, his longevity is just completely and utterly unprecedented. And I think as we get further and further removed, whenever LeBron does retire, I think it's just going to become more and more unanimous. Obviously, I think the younger generation fully appreciates LeBron, but I think that, again, when we're going to be able to fully look back at the scope and actually like take a step back when LeBron is actually all said and done, I think it's going to become even more and more of a consensus. And like I said earlier, man, I'm wondering if it's even going to be possible, man. Like,
it's an insanely high bar. I mean, just the combination of body and mind alone, where you're talking about a guy who is a tier 1 athlete and is tier 1 in terms of the smartest players to ever play, a guy who has an all-time great scoring peak and an all-time great playmaking peak and pretty much an all-time great defensive peak, and you put it all together. It's insane, and I really do think one thing that I have come to believe more so is that longevity really is what makes a GOAT. And it's not the coolest thing, right? Who is the best at their best is the coolest thing, but you just look around and it's like everybody agrees that Tom Brady is the GOAT. Except for Theo. I saw Theo actually didn't have Tom Brady as the GOAT, but that's Theo. He's a little bit different from the rest of us.
I was talking about this with Matt. I think Peyton was still number 1, which is incredible to me.
He was. Again, Theo is the GOAT. Theo's my GOAT, even though he doesn't have the longevity yet. But Theo aside, I don't think Tom Brady has the highest peak in NFL history when you're talking about quarterbacks. I don't think that most people do. But we all understand that the totality of what he did, the total value is the greatest. I think about my other favorite sport. I actually think Novak Djokovic does have the highest peak in tennis history, but that's marginal and that's arguable. What is inarguable is that he has the greatest resume ever because his longevity is just different from any of the other players who do have comparable peaks. He is incomparable in that way. I think, I'm not a big soccer guy, but Messi, everybody agrees is the GOAT, and I think most people would probably say that he has the GOAT peak as well, but like, what's the real separator? I think it's longevity with him too, right? That he's 38 years old and he's still as good as he is. So it makes a lot of sense. Like, there are all-time great players who can be comparable to the GOATs at their best. I don't think LeBron has the highest peak ever. I don't think Brady has the highest peak ever. But they did it at a high level for so much longer than anybody else that they just add the most value. They just have the best overall resumes. They're the GOATs. Like, it shouldn't come down to looking at the fucking counting stats, but it is pretty remarkable that LeBron has almost 42,000 career points at this point. That's pretty fucking insane that he's top 10 in everything. Like, again, it's not to say, points, rebounds, assists, that's what matters. It's more so just to say how fucking long this guy has been so good for. I think there's a good case he's the best player in the world from 2006 to 2020 with a couple years in there where, 2019, he's not healthy enough, but like, that's just fucking insane. And he's still a star in 2026, and we're still all on the edge of our seats wondering where he's going to go. Like, MJ may have it if you're comparing them at their best, but LeBron's got the career.
No doubt.
No doubt about it. Logan, we did it, man. Should we read out the whole top 50? Let's not do that. Let's just recap the top 10. Okay. We'll put up a graphic with the whole top 50.
That's a good call. That's a good call.
All right.
In my 10 spot, I had Hakeem Olajuwon. In my 9 spot, not my 10 spot, I had Larry Bird. In my 8 spot, I had Magic Johnson. In my 7 spot, Shaquille O'Neal. In my 6 spot, Steph Curry. In my 5 spot, Tim Duncan. 4, Bill Russell. 3, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. 2, Michael Jordan. And number 1, LeBron James.
At number 10, I had Magic Johnson. Number 9, Larry Bird. Number 8, Hakeem the Dream. Number 7, Steph Curry. Number 6, Tim Duncan. Number 5, Shaquille O'Neal. Number 4, Bill Russell. Number 3, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Number 2, Michael Jordan. And number 1, LeBron James. What a journey this was, Logan. This was awesome. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. Hope this will hold you guys over for a few years until we revisit this, and maybe we do a top 100. Why not?
Fuck it.
I would love that.
In
That
my
would be my dream
46
come
spot.
true. You're still going to have Chris Webber?
No.
Get Kevin McHale in your 46 spot.
I will.
I didn't have him in my top 50, but I'll tell you what, I sure considered it. Top 100 is going to give us a chance to talk about Paul George. That'll be fun.
Hersey Hawkins.
Nope, not Hersey Hawkins. So I said somebody who's actually going to be there.
Pete Chilcutt?
Pete Chilcutt is unfortunately just going to miss the cut. Him and Matt
Tom
Bullard
Gugliotta?
both. Tom Gugliotta, Logan. Now, that was a white boy who could hoop. Is he Tom McMillan,
Chambers?
though? Is he Tom Gola? Is he
Tom
Tom Meschery?
Satch Sanders?
Ooh, Tom Satch Sanders is a great. Are any of these guys really touching Bob Sura, though?
You know what? I'm going to have Orlando Robinson in my 100 spot.
Well, I'm going to put Milt Palacio at number 51. He just missed the cut. He makes a good case. His son is a Nerd Sesh fan, and he's a fine gentleman.
Fuck yeah.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for watching this entire series. A cool 15 hours of Yap on 50 players. That's just about on brand. We hope that you enjoyed. And once again, thank you guys so much for all the birthday wishes. You guys are just so dang sweet. And I just feel so grateful, man. What a wonderful thing this is that we get to talk about 50 players for 15 hours. We could just be doing this and nobody would be listening, and we'd be happy. But you guys actually choose to listen, and some of you guys I hear even enjoy it. Some of you guys hate it, but some of you guys even enjoy it, and that's pretty sweet. So thank you to all of you guys for that. And again, we have a full summer of wonderful content for you guys that I hope you will enjoy. More ranking shit. We're doing some brackets coming up that will be cool. We got a lot of trivia stuff, and LeBron has officially decided to make me bring my mic on my trip, Logan. He did not want to make his decision during his live podcast, and so that's the situation that I'm in.
He's going to drag it. He's going to drag it like Rodgers.
How long can he drag
That's
it,
the LeBron way, man. He's got to keep the eyeballs glued.
I'm not surprised, but it's like, all right, there does come to a point where it's like, let's make sure that we're giving the team enough time to get prepped for like training camp and shit, you know. Let's give him a few months, Braun. And we're about 3 months out from the season now, so we'll see how long he can push it. But you know what? We just talked about it. You're the GOAT, man. So do whatever you want, just as long as it makes you happy and as long as you come to the Warriors to play with Steph Curry. As long as you do that,
Steve Kerr says
man,
it's a done
cool
deal,
with me.
man.
I did see that. He's just such a jokester. Yeah, we'll see. We have Yaxel. That's a pretty big draw. If you don't want to come play with Yaxel, there's something wrong with you.
You
and
certainly
probably
don't
actually
want to
not
play
the GOAT.
against the Axel.
That's exactly the reason that you want to play with him. Because if you're on any of the other 29 teams, you're seeing him at least twice a year. And you're in hell.
You're done.
You're done. Just like this episode is done and this series is done and this podcast is done. This episode, not Nerd Sesh. Nerd Sesh, whether you like it or not, is still going on. So we appreciate you guys so much, as always. And with that, I've been Carson Brabber.
I've been Logan Camden.
And this was Nerd Sesh.